everyone. Happy Sunday. I know that I didn't put up that I was going live or anything, so I'm not really expecting many people to be here, except for my girl Truth. Hopefully, she'll stop in. Um, I wanted to go live for a few reasons. So, 12 gauge, I love you. I watch your stuff all the time. And every time you're on, I feel like I see it later and I like want to jump in the screen and be like, 12 gauge, like say this or say that or whatever. So, please don't see any of this as anything that has to do with you. You just literally did my favorite topic today, attachment. I teach about attachment for the past 20 years. Hi, Nina. So I wanted to do a little segment here about attachment styles and what that means in your adulthood. That show that you guys watched earlier about I know it is Child of Rage. I show it in my class. So when I literally like looked up and saw Beth Thomas's face on the TV, I was like, what is she doing? So I went on and I listened. And although you guys watched that one video, there's a second video. And Beth Thomas does not grow up with the parents that wound up adopting her. She winds up living with the therapist, okay? And that is completely. Um, I am completely heartbroken because Beth Thomas's parents really wanted them, right? So then she gives her to Camille, the therapist, and Camille is the one, if you guys watch the second part, that she winds up living with. And Camille goes on to become part of that therapy. I didn't watch the whole thing because I was getting like anxious. I was like, I need to jump on live because this just happened. So I figured, as somebody who teaches attachment disorder, and as somebody who teaches about adult attachment styles, I teach about adult attachment styles. As a matter of fact, I am going to provide you guys with the link of the adult attachment style, um, so that you can take it on your own if you want. I have my students take this attachment style. Just so you know, it's an attachment style that's done by Harvard University. So it's not just like something you found on Facebook type thing. So it's done by Harvard University. I'm going to post it in the comments. Let's see if it'll let me. There we go. Oh, it says CapCut link. It doesn't say the one that I just got from Attachment Style. So I don't know if it's going to let me. But if you look into it, I'll actually show you what it looks like on StreamYard. So this is what it looks like. So if you type in attachment style project into Google, look for this one, okay? It's called the Attachment Project. And this is done by Harvard University. And let's go into attachment real quick. So I even brought like the notes that I use in class because I don't know. I was getting nervous watching the video because their attachment is such a big topic that I think it needs to be taught, right? So 12 gauge, again, I hope you join because I have so many questions for you. But just so you guys know, attachment is a real thing. Like, it's not like, do you think this is real or isn't it? It is. It's definitely a real thing. It's been highly studied, okay? So that was one thing. Let me turn my phone off because people are starting to come home now. But anyway, so what I have in my notes that I usually show my students, and I'm going to take this down. Well, no, I'll leave that up for a minute. Okay, so attachment theory developed first by John Bowlby. So John Bowlby, and I don't want to show the video because I don't want YouTube to flag me, but John Bowlby is a famous researcher who looked at rhesus monkeys. So the reason we study monkeys or chimpanzees specifically, is because we share 98.5% of our DNA with chimpanzees. So watching chimpanzees is helpful in studying humans. So what John Bowlby set out to do in like the 60s was to see, what does love mean? So what does it mean to have love for your mother? How do we study love in a laboratory? Can you study love in a laboratory? Because love is subjective, right? What I constitute it as love might be different than what Nina constitutes as love or truth or, all of you. So we might all, Infinity, we might all have a different definition of love. So what does it really mean to love somebody? What does it really mean to love your mother? So what John Bowlby did was he got, this is horrible, but he got these rhesus monkeys and he took them from their parents, which is also horrible. Okay. But then what they wanted to see was they had a wire mother and a cloth mother. And the wire mother can only provide food. The cloth mother can only provide comfort. So they would raise these monkeys on a wire mother and a cloth mother. And what they noticed is that the monkey spent most of its day on the cloth mother. And the only time it went to the wire mother was for food. That shows right there that infants need contact comfort. Gage was 100% right that if you look at studies that a baby can die from not being loved enough, right? So that was real. So with that being said, I just want to make sure that everybody understands what attachment style really means. So with the cloth mother and the wire mother, what they noticed was when a baby was raised on both moms, that it went to the cloth mother most of the time and to the wire mother just to eat. However, they then were like, okay, well, what happens if a baby only has a wire mother? Will they be able to relate to the cloth mother? So what would happen was they would put a cloth in a room in a strange situation, they called it. And the strange situation is just a situation that the monkey's never seen before. Long story short, you guys, there's a cloth in the room. And because the monkey never had it from the very beginning, it doesn't even associate the cloth with comfort. Okay. So it literally like goes in the corner and rocks back and forth because it's scared and it's looking for its cloth mother, but it doesn't have one. So the point there is that if you don't have that attachment in childhood, which is what happened to Beth, that there is a risk of not being able to attach in adulthood. I do think they did Beth a good job by getting her help early. However, you guys didn't get the whole story, but I want to stick to about attachment because I'm not trying to go like against Beth's story or whatever. She's clearly been traumatized, but I do want you guys to understand attachment a little bit better. So I'm going to stop sharing that screen real quick, but I will make sure that I put the link up so that if anybody wants to take that, I would love for you guys, maybe after the live, I could put the link up and then maybe by the next time I go live or we'll make a special live for adult attachment style, you guys could all take it so that you know your adult attachment style so that when I go over the different adult attachment styles, it'll make sense to you. And then you guys can ask me questions. And because I teach about this, I get questions about this all the time. Okay. Let me read the chat real quick, see what's going on. Hi, everyone. Okay, so let's see. So we have Nina, Truth. Oh, we have a couple people in here. Okay, good. So John Bowlby, rhesus monkeys, right? Now we go on to one of his students, Mary Ainsworth. Mary Ainsworth was like, why don't we take this study and we do it in children? That's a whole different class that we could teach, right? So Mary Ainsworth does like the same type of thing, but with humans. And what they did was they had the mother take the baby into a strange situation, so into a room full of toys, but the baby's never been in the room before. So the mom sits down and they watch the baby. So the baby starts walking around the room, looking at everything, and then they have a stranger come in. When the stranger comes in, it's the stranger's job to play with the baby. The mom knows this too. They're trying to see the baby's reaction. So the baby's very hesitant and gets closer to mom because the baby's scared, doesn't know who the stranger is. Mom kind of like is like, it's okay or whatever. But the baby still is a little bit awkward when it comes to the stranger. They then give mom a signal to leave the room. Mom leaves the room. And that's where they want to see what happens now. So now the baby freaks out. They have mom come back in and it's the reunion that they're measuring. In the reunion, when mom picks the baby up, if she's able to soothe the baby at once, like if she picks them up and the baby's like still a little whiny, but the baby stops crying, they have a secure attachment. That's a good thing. That means that this baby trusts its mother, right? They do it a second time just to make sure, which I think is probably unnecessary. But you'll see that then there's other babies who, although they want their mother, so they want their mother to pick them up, they're a little bit more anxious, okay? So because somebody, and we're going to go over this, somebody who's had an anxious attachment, or if you do have an anxious attachment, you could have gotten, again, I don't want to, I'm not calling anybody's parents bad here because that's not, hi, Lo. So we're talking about attachment. So if anybody has an anxious attachment, it doesn't mean that you had a bad parent. Probably you just had a misinformed parent, right? So, and some of us as parents might have done this in the past, not knowing any better. It doesn't mean we're bad parents. We just didn't know any better. So, this is what I would tell you. If you are a parent, content creator, anything, let's say you're online, but you're home, okay, and you're working at home and you have a little kid. If you have a toddler that doesn't understand what work is and doesn't understand that you must sit at this computer desk in order to get paid so that we can do things, if they don't understand that yet, then to them, you're ignoring them. Okay. So let's say the kid goes and smashes their face into the couch, right? And then comes to you crying, but you're in a meeting. A lot of parents will be like try to push the kid away, like, oh, it's okay. Like, you'll be all right. And then they try to go back to it later, but that's not when the kid needed them. The kid needed them right then in the moment. So I tell my students that as a professional, I would rather you just say, 1 second, please, and turn off your camera and your mic. Help your kid real quick, give them a kiss, even if it's just for 3 seconds, let them know that they were the important one, okay? And then get back to your whatever you were doing. I promise you, 90% of bosses understand this, especially if you have a female boss who has been through this herself. Okay, so this is what I want to teach you. So, attachment theory, developed by John Bowlby, was extended by Mary Ainsworth, and it describes how early bonds with caregivers influence interpersonal relationships throughout life. An interpersonal relationship is just a relationship with somebody else. Okay, and this really does affect your life. The good news is, you guys, if you take this attachment study that I posted, and you don't have a secure attachment, the good news is that you can. Okay, it's not too late. You can still get a secure attachment. Why do I think attachment is so important to teach? Like, I don't even know where to start here because I literally got so revved up. I was so tired. I was like laying in bed. I didn't want to get out of bed. And then when I heard Gage talking about attachment, I was like, oh my God, this is like my sign to get up and go live, because I really want to make sure, I never want attachment theory to be taught wrong. And it's such a topic that people are interested in that I want to make sure that we do it right. And 12 was doing it right. It's just that he introduced it and then it kind of just went like, not like, it just went to like, okay, we'll talk about this again in the future. But then what does that do for people who are worried about their own attachment styles? So again, I'm going to give you an adult attachment quiz. Hopefully you're 18 or older if you're in here. Even if you're 17, you might be able to take the adult attachment quiz, but I would recommend 18 or older. So they wanted to look at attachment styles in adulthood to see if they mirror those formed in infancy, reflecting how individuals relate to others emotionally, navigate intimacy, and cope with separation or conflict. So understanding these styles helps explain relationships, communication, and emotional resilience patterns, okay? So if you were taught to be emotionally resilient in childhood, chances are, as an adult, you use some of those skills to be emotionally resilient in adulthood. If you were not taught those skills in childhood, you have to keep in mind, we only create, whether we're talking about Bryan Kohberger or any of these cases, Bryan Kohberger included, you only create in your mind what you've either seen or been exposed to. So even if you're thinking about something like aliens, right? So maybe, I don't know if anybody saw my UFO video last night, but I definitely caught something on video. But if not, it's on a short on my page. You have to check it out and let me know what the heck you think it is. My husband even saw it in the video. He was like, what the heck was that? A shooting star? And then we slowed it up and it had 2 legs. I was like, that is not a shooting star. But anyway, oh, my puppy, isn't he cute? This is Thor. This is my handsome man, Thor. Okay, so back to attachment. Sorry about that. So, again, the thing you want to get to is secure attachment. You also have to remember there's 1 secure attachment and 3 types of insecure attachment. So if you get insecure attachment, don't feel like you can't share. Most of my students, and this actually upsets me, get insecure attachment. And it wasn't like that before. I've been teaching for 20 years, and 20 years ago, most of my students got secure attachment. Nowadays, they're getting insecure attachment. And this is even before the pandemic. I think the pandemic made it worse, but I think social media might have something to do with this as well. I don't know. Maybe it could be that mom stayed home more back in the day. I don't know. There's many reasons, but that's a whole research study in itself, okay? And that's not what we're here for. So early attachment formation. Let's talk about that real quick. So Bowlby proposed that attachment begins in infancy, with infants forming emotional bonds with caregivers to secure safety and meet emotional needs. The quality of these interactions influences a child's internal working model or mental framework for relationships later on. Your internal working model just means, how do I feel about myself? Am I lovable? Am I worthy of being loved? Am I worthy of loving other people? All of those things. That's your internal working model. It's like your sense of self, okay? Your sense of identity. Who are you, okay? Are you worthy of being loved? Are you worthy of loving someone else? I think that's why I get along with a lot of people too, in these chat rooms, is because a lot of times people, we all, including myself, have a past, and I think I'm able to connect to that through things like attachment. So we're going to go over some patterns in attachment, okay? So let's go over the different attachment styles and why they're important. First of all, I do want to tell you this. So this next part I'm telling you is Jamie theory. This is not like John Bowlby theory or Mary Ainsworth theory. I'm going to tell you what I teach. This is what I've seen in my years, my 46 years of life, okay? This is what I've been able to gauge through living in Philadelphia, stuff like that. A securely attached individual often finds a securely attached individual later on. An insecurely attached individual often finds an insecurely attached individual in adulthood. I call this the worriers and the warriors. Okay, so let me explain what I mean. If you're a little kid and you're in an insecure environment, so now again, insecure attachment can be many things, you guys. It doesn't mean that you had a bad parent. You can have an insecure attachment and again, just have a parent that was misinformed. But you can also have a bad parent or a neglectful parent or a parent that was abusive. And that definitely can form this warrior warrior thing that I'm talking about. So think about in places where a kid sees abuse at home. So whether it's them being abused, whether they're watching their parents be abused, I don't know if you guys know this, but you know that saying, monkey see, monkey do, that came from the mirror neuron system. And it just says that our brain understands something that we see as if it's happening to ourselves. So if you're a little kid and you watch mom get beat up by dad might as well have beaten you up too. I don't mean that like that, but you guys know, like according to your brain takes it in as if, you know, it happened to you. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. That little girl often goes to school, and while all the other little girls are writing letters like, do you like Mike? Circle yes or no. And then you're like trying to pass it around. At that time, this little kid is not able to participate in that. This little kid is so worried that when they get home tonight, is my dad going to be drunk again? Are my mom and dad going to fight? If you guys have any experience with this and you want to share, if you put it in the chat, maybe put a 1 in the chat if you've experienced hard times growing up. Let's just say it that way, because that could be very, very, very broad. And if you want to be more specific, please do so. But you don't have to. I don't want anybody to feel that like they have to put their stuff out there. Okay. So these little warriors go to school and they're worried all day. So instead of being 12-year-olds or, 9-year-olds, they're at school worrying about, again, is the police going to get caught again tonight? Are my neighbors going to see this again? Blah, 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 blah. So they're worried all day long. They're not doing those age appropriate behaviors that other kids not going through the same thing are. For little boys, I think of them more like warriors. So if you've ever been a little boy out there and you're watching this and you come from a household where maybe you saw mom being abused by dad or by, stepdad or whatever the class may be. True said she slept in class a lot. That's funny. Hi, Aquarius. Oh, thank you so much for stopping in. I appreciate that. So for the little warriors, the little boy, think of the little boy that comes to class and is like, other little boys are talking about like, do you want to play baseball or, basketball after class? And this little boy is a warrior. So they're not worried about what they're doing after class today. All they're worried about is my mom and dad going to get into another fight tonight, or the cops going to be called? Someday I'm going to be big enough and tough enough where they're not going to be able to do that to my mom anymore. Someday I'm going to get so again, they put on that warrior type vest. What happens is, you guys, the warriors and the warriors grow up and they find each other. Okay. Wow. Truth. See, so there you go. So that was a warrior. And chances are that those worries in childhood then transfer over into adulthood. And Truth, I'm not going to speak on you because I feel like we have a different type of like, I don't know. Like I feel like I don't know. I'm not putting your shit out there, but I get what you're saying, and I think that we can connect a lot of that to things that we talk about in today's day and age. And just so you guys know, I have my own shit growing up too. So like I'm not coming at this from like a holier than thou type person. If anything, I get it. Oh, the truth just said I get it. So maybe that was meant to be. I get it. So I want to share it. Okay, so the warriors and the warriors often find each other. Why is this not okay? Because when you don't know any better, or when you're not given the right treatment, when you don't get in your head that this isn't okay, and some people will know that it's okay, but they don't understand how to sit with what's considered normal, like not hitting each other and stuff like that. Sometimes it feels awkward because it's not what they know. That's why therapy is so very important in these situations. Okay. So, with that being said, you don't want warriors to grow up and find each other, because then that winds up being a toxic relationship. I tell my students all the time, and just so you guys are aware, I do have my master's in counseling psychology, but then I went back and got a 12 credit specialization. So I did an entire extra year on family therapy and couples therapy. So when it comes to attachment and relationships, I really am an expert in this. So I just want you guys to know that I'm not just coming out of this from, out of anywhere. So if you have a secure attachment, so if you take this test and you have a secure attachment, some of the characteristics of that would be that you're comfortable with intimacy and independence, you trust others, and you're open to an emotional connection. Some of you, if you're in like a long distance relationship, I would ask you, is it because you've really found somebody in a long distance relationship that you care about? Maybe that's the answer. That's great. For other people, they might not realize that they're doing it because there's an emotional unavailability in that, right? So that's important too. So effective communication and conflict resolution, just meaning that if you fight, you know how to talk about it. If you have communication problems, you can talk about it. What's the origins of result of a responsive and supportive caregiver? So the caregiver that stopped what they were doing and looked at you for a minute and was like, oh, like Beth didn't get. Okay. So Beth from what 12 gauge was showing, that's what she wasn't getting. Okay. If you have an anxious, preoccupied attachment, which is one of the things, and again, I'm only giving you an overview because I do want to do this again, but I want to somehow post the link to the adult attachment survey so that you guys could take it before we go over it. That way you guys could ask me questions about your adult attachment style and I can help you answer them. So if you're anxious, preoccupied, this means that your caregiver, that you crave intimacy, but you fear rejection and abandonment. Okay. So there are people out there that crave love. They want to be loved and they want to love other people, but they're afraid of rejection and abandonment. Just so you guys know, we talk about personality disorders a lot on this channel. Borderline personality disorder at its core is a fear of abandonment. That's what it is. Okay. That doesn't mean that everybody who's abandoned has personality disorder, but I'm just saying we talk about personality disorders a lot and I wanted to point that out. So again, also with anxious, preoccupied, this person may seek reassurance and may appear clingy. Okay. So why would they appear clingy? Because they might always be thinking they're always waiting for the other shoe to drop. They're always waiting for, is somebody going to leave me? So on and so forth. And then sensitive to partners' emotional states. The origins associated with inconsistent caregiving. So sometimes you were nurtured, other times they were distant. So sometimes you could go to them and they could be like, oh, come here, let me kiss your boo-boo. And other time it was like, get away. So this may lead to dependency and difficulty trusting partners and commitment. Developing a secure attachment as an adult is important to do. Oh, that was the next part. Sorry. Let me go back on that. I missed the spot. Avoidant dismissive attachment. And again, I'm going to get into other things too, because I don't want to lose people. But the fact that if I lose anybody on this, that would say to me that you might have an insecure attachment. Not if you, again, let me reword that. Let me back up and reword that. A lot of people that aren't interested in this, a lot of times it's because it's either very hurtful or it's like a trigger, right? If that's you, please, 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 I don't want you to stay in a show that you feel triggered in, right? So that's not why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because I saw Beth Thomas on screen earlier, And I don't think you guys got the whole story. I don't think you got the whole story about reactive attachment disorder, which is a whole nother thing. But I have a ton of notes on all this stuff, you guys, and I just had to pick something. So, and again, I'm going to make this short and sweet because then I'm going to hang up and I'm going to redo a live stream and talk about like Coburger or something else where we get more people and we talk more. But I did want to make sure that I put this up there because I couldn't let that video just go up and not add this part to it. I think this part is really important. If you have an avoidant dismissive attachment, there's only two more. Avoidant dismissive attachment, some of the characteristics are you value independence and self-reliance, and you often avoid close emotional ties, okay? Why would you avoid close emotional ties? Because you might have had emotional unavailability within your parent, okay? And again, it doesn't mean that you had a bad parent. You could have had a parent that they weren't taught that you're not supposed to show kids emotion like that. It could be anything. So this isn't, a bashing on anyone's parents. So you may suppress emotional needs and minimize vulnerability. So almost like, yeah, it's okay. Like, whatever. I got stabbed. No big deal. Like that type of thing, right? May seem aloof or distant in relationships. Being distant in relationships, if you're avoidant and dismissive, avoidance behavior occurs when we're anxious or fearful about something, right? So if you get into a car accident on the main road to get to school and it was a pretty bad car accident and now you're afraid to drive on that road, there are people, instead of taking that 5-minute road to get to school, that will take a 45-minute alternate road to get to school because they don't want to go down that road again. That's avoidance behavior. The more you avoid behaviors, the more anxious you become about it. I just want you guys to know that. I also want you to know that anxiety in itself is not a bad emotion, okay? A lot of people think that having anxiety is a bad emotion. It's not. It's actually a survival emotion. Just think about it. If you had a predator and if we didn't get scared, we wouldn't know that it was coming, right? So anxiety, and then let's say we hear footsteps. Anxiety is a future focused emotion. Let me just say that. So it's something about the future. An example I could give you is the first time you ever went on an upside down ride. By the time you got to that day, maybe you were like sick to your stomach. You were like, I don't want to do this, but you promised your cousins that you would. The thing is that you'll go on the ride, and whether you loved it or you hated the ride, when you get off, your anxiety goes away. Why? Because you did it. So you might have done it and been like, I hate that. I never want to do that again. You may also say, I love that. Let's go right back on. But the point is that your anxiety goes away. So anxiety is a future focused emotion, and it's not bad until it's disproportionate with the situation. Okay. So back to avoidant dismissive attachment. So they may seem aloof. I said that in relationships. What are the origins of this? This is linked to caregivers who discouraged emotional expression or were emotionally unavailable. So again, this parent could have taught kids like, go cry in your room. You're not supposed to show, weakness, things like that. And that's bullshit. Just so you guys know, even if you're a guy out there, it is okay to have emotion. In relationships, this is what this looks like. This person struggles with intimacy and often avoids dependence on others. So it's like they're super independent. Okay. So avoidant dismissive attachment is super independent. Avoidant dismissive attachment, just so you guys know, is often can look like secure attachment until emotional bonding occurs. So with a secure attachment, they'll go in on emotional bonding. With avoidant dismissive attachment, they want to go in. They want that love and affection, but they're afraid of it. And therefore, they're like, I'm not depending on the other person to give me love. I've been okay by myself for so many years. I've been independent. I can do it myself. I don't need that other person. So they'll often stop themselves. And if you're ever in a relationship and you break up relationships just as they're getting good, you might be one of these people, right? So, and again, the good news is that you could get past this. But, oh, Truth said bingo. So there you go, Truth. Oh, Truth. Now I'm nervous because I'm securely attached. No, I'm just joking. I'm joking. But we can get you to secure attachment. Okay, that's the good news. But again, as long as I'm by myself and I can take care of myself and I know that I can afford myself, I know that I can, I get to jump on YouTube whenever I want. I maybe don't have kids anymore that I have to like run around with, stuff like that. To some people, that's a very attractive thing because they get to avoid intimacy without looking like they're trying to avoid intimacy. So that person can go through this where I think like with anxious attachment, we can often see this in anxiety, right? So she said you're safe though because you're out of state. But the thing is that if you look over here, that has to do with emotional unavailability. So I guess truth, what I would say to you is that thank God I know that I'm not this person, but I think that what you fear is getting too close to somebody. And then, like, what if me and you were talking a lot on the phone or something and we're telling each other about our lives? And then all of a sudden, Monday, you just don't hear from me anymore. So apparently, somewhere in your life, not you personally, but somewhere in that person's life, they would seem, this would have happened to them before where somebody might have pieced out. It could have been them that pieced out just because they were afraid of intimacy. You know what I mean? So keep that in mind. If you're somebody that does that, I challenge you to stick in that relationship and see where it goes. Maybe that person just had something going on and wasn't able to get in touch with you. Somebody with an avoidant dismissive attachment might assume, like, of course you're not, going to get back to me type thing. So like, F you, I'm blocking you. And it might not be that. The other person could be in jail. I'm in jail. I said in jail. They could be in the hospital with a heart attack. They could be in jail too, right? But they weren't able to get in touch with you as the point. So if you had a secure attachment, you might assume those other things, that maybe something bad happened. Maybe I should send somebody over there to see if they're okay, so on and so forth. Let's get to the last one. So the last one is called a disorganized, fearful, avoidant attachment. So disorganized, fearful, avoidant attachment. The characteristics of this attachment style is you simultaneously have desires and fear of intimacy. So the desire is strong, the fear of intimacy is just as strong. You experience high levels of inner conflict, mistrust, and emotional instability. So this one goes even a step further than the last one. So this one, the person is emotionally unstable. They avoid relationships due to fear of rejection, but may also be clingy when they do have partners. So this is the person that needs to put their finger. Remember when I said finger? Now we use the facial recognition. But if somebody ever asks you to put your facial recognition or their facial recognition on your phone, so that right there is a huge red flag. You guys break up with that person right away. I promise you. That is not going to end well. And if you stay in that relationship, it's going to be emotionally draining for a long time, right? So in that relationship, you have to have trust for somebody, right? And then if you trust somebody and they're not trustworthy, right? Use it as a lesson learned for the future. And instead of seeing it as a reflection of you, because again, I always say this, the good news is it's probably not about you. The bad news is it's probably not about you. But if you have a clingy partner, just know that it has to do probably with the way that they were raised, and that the clinginess, it's not something you're doing, but it's also something that you should be hyper aware of, because you don't want that to destroy your relationship years later. So where does this come from? So often tied to traumatic experiences, abuse, or neglect during childhood. So we do see things like traumatic experience. And again, traumatic experience can occur outside of your family. It doesn't mean that your parents did this to you. For Beth had a traumatic experience in the first 19 months of life. I think Beth is a testament to how infantile amnesia, or the ability to remember things before 3, is just that. It's infantile amnesia. It doesn't mean that it didn't affect the brain. So I think that I show her often because of that. And then in relationships for disorganized attachment, relationships may be chaotic. They may be marked by cycles of closeness and then withdrawal, closeness and then withdrawal. So if that happens, right? Oh my God, Truth, you're hysterical. But if that happens, if you feel like you're, in love and then hate, love, hate. Whenever I hear people saying that, you're in love when you want to kill the person or whatever, I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? You should never want to kill somebody. Like, that to me is intensity. So that person is probably mistaking intensity for love. Okay. If you've just met somebody and you're in love with them already after a week and a half, you're probably mistaking intensity for love. They're not the same emotion. Okay. Love is often boring. Let me be honest. So when I look at my friends' or relationships or my students' relationships, the ones that have the most dramatic relationships are the ones that seem exciting because there's always something going on in their life. But the exciting dating, yes, lust. It's lust, not love. That's exactly right. And lust is intimate. I mean, is intensity. So that's exactly what it is. Yes, it's called lust. Okay, well, in psychology, we also call it intimacy. So I'm just kidding, Truth. I love you. Um, and it even has a time limit. Ooh, I like that. That's actually true, Truth. And I never thought of it that way. It does have a time limit because lust doesn't last forever. And then what happens is, let's say you have two people that have different attachment styles, and one of them has a secure attachment and one's an insecure attachment. The secure attachment could be moving along their feelings as if it is a loving thing. And if it's just lust for the other person, even if they don't realize it, so they might think that they're in love, but it's just lost, right? When that time limit runs out, that's when things break down. And that's when, people get their feelings hurt and stuff like that. So I do think it's important that we understand this. So we need to understand that attachment styles can help individuals improve their relationship by identifying maladaptive patterns and working towards a secure attachment behaviors. And again, if this is you, if you have any of these insecure attachment styles that I talked about, I would tell you to start sitting with the things that you know are supposed to be okay that maybe make you feel uncomfortable. So, for example, if somebody opens the door for you and that makes you feel uncomfortable because, you're not used to that, things like that, let them open the door for you. Sit with it. After a while, those things start to become what is normal in your life, and you'll start to see the other things as abnormal. And then this will help you with your dating meter, if you will. Okay. Therapy, such as emotionally focused therapy, can address attachment wounds and promote healthier relationships, which is what Beth had going on. Awareness of attachment styles can enhance parenting, improve future generations' emotional outcomes. And I think this is important too. My generation, I'm 46, so anybody in my age group, we were traumatized a little bit because our parents, we weren't allowed to go talk to anybody. Therapy was like out of the question. At least in my household, it was like, you know, absolutely not type thing. As we got older, obviously things changed, and then I went to school for therapy and stuff like that. So it definitely changed. But when I was younger, at first, I don't know if it was a fear of exposing family secrets. And again, some of you might be able to relate to this. You might have family secrets, so there might be something that that you don't even know about. So therapy is not for wimps. That's what I got to say to you, Truth. Therapy is not for wimps. Do not listen to Truth. I'm going to punch her. She's lucky she's too far away for me to reach. Therapy is not for wimps. Therapy helps you to, it is not a privacy breach. I am so happy. Truth, I'm throwing the link in. I said I was never throwing the link in, and I'm doing it. I'm inviting you to come up because I'm not just going to keep reading these. You're coming up and talking to me about this. Because I do think that this is important. And chances are, if this is how you're thinking, then other people are thinking the same way. And in class, we have like a discussion. So, and I get to give the other side of it. So, Truth, if you would like to come up, I just dropped or anybody, I'm like scared to say that because I don't know who's in chat, but I'll take it on today. I got this. So, Truth, hopefully you come up so that we can talk about this. So, oh, that's how they looked at it back then. Yes, I thought you meant now, Truth. I was going to say, I'm about to come find you. That's how they looked at it back then, was a breach of trust. You're absolutely right. And now the therapist knows just as much about your family. And now if we see them out and at the local supermarket, things like that, now our parents are looking at them weird. Like, what do you know about me? And even she said, no. I love you, Truth. You're funny. You don't have to come up if you don't want. I would love for you to come up, though. You don't have to put your camera on, obviously, but just to have a little conversation so that I could ask questions just to see where you guys are with this. So back to relationships real quick. I think it's important that we understand attachment styles. And no, Truth, I didn't want you to come up to explain yourself. That's not why I wanted you to come up. I wanted you to come up to help provide the other side, like what other people might be thinking, not you personally. I always tell people when I say you, just so you guys know, I don't necessarily mean somebody specifically out there. I use you a lot because of teaching. So I have to generalize a lot. So I use the word you a lot. And sometimes I think when I say it, I have to remind people. I do it with my daughters all the time. I'm always like, you guys, I don't mean you personally. Because I'll be like, you don't want to. And then I'm like, no, no, no. Like, I used to hate when my mom did that to me. She would be like, you don't want to do this. And I'd be like, yes, I do. So I make sure that I let people know that I'm not talking about them specifically. But just so that you know, if you're in a relationship, that it is important to make sure you get to a securely attached place so that you can accept love, you can receive love, and you can also learn how to be by yourself in a way that is, oh my gosh, my dog is loving keeps like attacking me over here, but that you're in a relationship and that you're able to not only get love and receive love, but that you also have the separation to where you're able to be an independent person as well. So you want to make sure that you're independent on top of being together. Sometimes in relationships, when people are together all the time or they're doing everything together, again, that intensity thing, flag goes up for me. I had a student 2 weeks ago tell me that they went on a first date and that they didn't do anything with the person, which was, I was like, oh, that's good, whatever. But I said, so what did you do? And they said, all right, George, stop. They said they laid in bed and talked about their entire lives for like 10 hours. I was like, oh my God, that was a bad move. So why was that a bad move? Because they pretty much just trauma dumped. Okay. So make sure you're not trauma dumping, especially in the beginning of a relationship. If you're on a first date with somebody, don't talk about your ex unless somebody asks. If somebody specifically asks you and is like, tell me about your past relationships, that's different. But if nobody asks, do not offer up any of that information. Okay. I know he keeps pulling me. Watch. He's like, Mom, get me love. Thor, come here. Oh, and he's ruining my shirt. You're stuck to me, Thor. There you go. He's pulling on my shirt and stuff. He's like, come on, Mom, give me some love. Okay. Is there any questions out there? Does anybody have questions for me about relationships, attachment style? Because I have so many things over here. The truth is that with attachment style, it can have an effect on your brain. So I did want to make sure I pointed that out, and that your parenting styles can have an effect on your child's attachment style. So with parenting styles, there's 4 of them, and it's how much do we're looking at communication and rules and regulation. So loving communication, rules and regulation. There's 4 parenting styles. So with authoritative parent, this is what you want to be someday, right? You want to be an authoritative parent, which means that you set boundaries, you set rules and regulations, but that you also have open communication with your kid. So for example, let's say your kid has to be home by 10 o'clock on the weekends, no questions asked, but they're going to a movie tonight and they know the movie's not going to get over till 10:30. This person can sit with mom or dad and be like, look, we're going to the movie tonight. I know that I'm supposed to be home by 10, but the movie's not. And the parent would be like, okay, like they'll talk to them about it. Okay, just make sure you get home right after. Fine. Okay, then we have, so there's both. They have communication and they have boundaries as well. Then we have our authoritarian parenting, authoritarian. This is not what you want, but unfortunately, I have a feeling that a lot of you had parents like this. So the authoritarian parent, it's do what I say and that's it. So like you would never talk back to this parent because if you didn't do what they say, you were punished next weekend too, type thing. And you might just be fearful to say anything to this parent just out of fear of not knowing what might happen to you if you talk back in that way, right? So with an authoritarian parent, they're very strict, they're emotionally distant, and they can lead to avoidant attachment due to fear of criticism or rejection. Let me say that over. So an authoritarian parent, so the one that just has rules and regulation, they don't have the communication. So if you were the person going to the movies, you would assume that you're going to have to get the last half hour of the movie from your friends the next day on the telephone because you're not even asking your parents if you could be home a half hour late. It's not even worth it in the end. They always say no. It's their, word and that's it. I would say that has a lot to do with control on the parent side. They also could have been raised that way. And because they grew up and got a job and they're in a marriage and they have kids and they're raising you, to them, they might think, well, I turned out okay, so why not? You know what I mean? But that does not lead to secure attachment. And again, we actually have seen in research that this leads to avoidant attachment due to things like fear of criticism and rejection. If you're ever talking to somebody, you guys, and they've been highly criticized in life, they're very defensive. So if somebody gets defensive with you, again, I want you to remember that the good news is it's probably not about you, but the bad news is it's probably not about you. So that person has probably been hyper criticized at some point in their life, that they automatically assume that whatever it is you're saying or whatever your position is, that you are judging them. So sometimes just starting a conversation by saying, I'm not judging you. I'm not like, there's no judgment here. I'm not criticizing you. Um, True says people's means of discipline or degree of discipline has a lot of variables. That's true. True. Some people get smacked across the face. Other people, they're just like, don't talk to me. You're punished again. And then I have another one. I'm not sure where your live came from on my YouTube algorithm, but I've enjoyed listening so far. Love, I hope you subscribe to my channel. I am Dr. Vona. I was listening, Love, when I woke up today. And Tarot, I'm all about it. So I'll be checking you out too. And I'll make sure I give you a subscription after this because I'm all about the tarot card reading. But we're talking about attachment. So there's a little girl, Beth, that another live streamer went over. And I love this live streamer, but they kind of like left off at attachment. And I teach about attachment at the university level. So I just jumped on so that I could fill in that part for them. So again, in relationships, you guys, some kids just have fear of disappointing their parents, and that's all it takes to behave. But this is the thing, Truth. I also had a fear of disappointing my parents, but in my household, it was normal to yell and scream. So whoever like yelled the loudest is the one that got heard. So in every household is very different, right? I also didn't want to disappoint my parents, but at the same time, I was able to talk to them and understand where they were coming from, but then also understand that I'm my own human and that I need to make my own decisions for my life. Because the truth is, at the end of the day, unfortunately, and this is how it should be, we should bury our parents. They should never bury their kids. So, Nina, prayers to you. That is not a normal situation. And just so you guys know, you can have a completely secure attachment and then something horrific happened to you, like the loss of a child, and that can knock you right off of that. The good news is that you can get back to secure attachment. The bad news is that we never expect somebody to get over the loss of a child. It's just not natural. You're not supposed to bury your children. They're supposed to bury you. Okay. So with that being said, an authoritarian parent might think that they did it the right way. They have a lot of rules and regulations. This parent might even hit you if you don't listen. So you might get backhanded, so on and so forth. So they have high rules and regulation, no communication. Then we have permissive parenting. Okay. This is a form of neglect, you guys. So sometimes with permissive parenting, people get this confused. So they'll think that, I'm going to give a scenario. So mom and dad get divorced, and mom and daughter get an apartment together, and daughter's 17, senior in high school. This is when this parenting relationship turns into a friendship. I know that people want to be friends with their kids, but the truth is that whether you're 16, 46, 66, your parent should always be a parent, and you should always be able to go to them as a parent. Can you enjoy them as more than a parent at some point? Sure, but not at 17 years old. At 17 years old, you have to be a parent. You can't become a friend. What happens with permissive parenting styles is that there's no rules and regulations and all communication. So again, this takes on a friendship role when it shouldn't. And what I don't think parents understand, sometimes they think that their kid's old enough to handle it, but their brain's not completely done developing until you're 25 years old. So their brain is now taking in that this type of parenting is okay. And if you think about it, and I remember hearing this on 12 gauges, a lot of us don't remember what happened, before a certain age of our life, or we might have one or two memories of something from when we were 4 or 5, and then maybe don't remember again until we were 10. That's not abnormal. And it can happen for many reasons. It can happen from trauma. It can happen for many reasons. Okay. Oh, you should go back to, Love, get in touch with me. You can find my, email on my channel, but email me about that because I'll tell you on the side, but whatever. I love psychology and we need more psychologists out there, but we're definitely underpaid. We're either underpaid or overpaid, if that makes sense. So I don't do the one on one counseling thing right now because I can't. I grew up in like a lower income area and there's nobody that I grew up with that can afford a $300 session. It's just, it doesn't happen. So instead, I decided to be a research psychologist and I research this stuff and I teach it. And do I still help people with counseling? Sure, sometimes, but it's not my favorite part of psychology. So I would like to give you guidance if you would like some love. Um, that way you hit it the first time and you don't find yourself like trying this, trying that, trying this, trying that. So if you want to reach out to me, I will be happy to help you. Okay, so with relationships, does anybody have questions so far about the parenting relationship? Okay, so permissive parenting is not okay. You should not be best friends with your kid. And then the last one is just, I don't know why I don't have it over here, but the last one is just dismissive and neglectful parenting. So this parent has no rules and regulations and they have no love and communication. So this might be a parent who is neglectful or traumatizes their kid or isn't giving their kid what they need, right? So that does not lead to, that leads, if anything, to a very chaotic, traumatic environment, which could lead to a disorganized attachment. So I think it's really important. So the one that leads to a secure attachment is authoritative. I have students that mix up authoritative and authoritarian all the time. So how can you guys remember this? This is going to sound crazy, but my students say that they never forgot it after I said this. If you look at the word authoritative, there's a V towards the end. If you look at authoritarian, there's an end on the end, right? If you put two dots over the V and two dots over the end, the one that makes a smiley face is good, the one that makes a frown face is bad. So authoritative with the V, if you put the two dots, it looks like a smiley face. Authoritarian, if you put two dots over the end, it looks like a frowny face. So that's how you can remember the two. So authoritative is the one that you want to be. You want to set rules and regulations. Consistency is key as a parent. If you're you have to be consistent. The minute you're not consistent, your kids know that they can get in between you and your spouse and play you guys against each other, and that never leads to anything good either. So I wanted to make sure we went over that. Does anybody have any questions about Beth Thomas? Because again, I show that in my classes. And when I saw it today on 12 gauges, I was so mad that I missed it because I literally show that in my classes. And I so could have offered a lot for that one. Not that he knows that I know who Beth Thomas is. So I'm not saying that for him. I'm going to end this off a little bit by saying this. So I have statistics, like I always do, because I'm a statistics teacher. So I have a statistic more about relationships. So when it comes to happiness in general, and this is also peer reviewed from Harvard University, so I don't just give, I could even put, I don't know how, but maybe in like the description afterwards, I can put a link to the attachment quiz. And I challenge you, please take the adult attachment quiz. I think you'll find out a lot about yourself. You'll find out a lot about why you do the things that you do in relationships, why you're not in a relationship, so on and so forth. And then here we go. So if you give yourself 10 minutes a day for complete silence, you increase happiness. I don't know if you guys know that. So 10 minutes of complete silence a day, and this is a Harvard University statistic. If you give yourself 10 minutes a day for complete silence, you increase your happiness physiologically, which means that they could see it in the brain and the body. I'm going to ask you guys a questions real quick. So what number, if you were making money, what number is the magic number for a family of four for people to be happy? So how much does somebody have to make? So what do you guys think? Like, how much would you have to make for a family of four to where you think you'd be happy? I'll give it a second for you guys to type it in. And then I'm going to give you real statistics. I have an answer for that too. So why people are putting it in there, I'll just say it. So just so you guys know, according to Harvard University, um, okay, Truth, you're not married and no kids, but if you were to guess that you had to support yourself and three other people, how much money do you think the average American, and again, this doesn't mean that this is real, you guys, this is perception, and perception is reality. All right, 80K. Ding, 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 ding. $75,000 is the answer. So good job, love. Thank you for guessing. So $75,000 is the magic number for a family of four. When defining happiness, anything more than 75,000 in Alabama, 80K. Perfect. That's exactly where I'm going with this. And it probably is 80K, you guys, because this statistic is from 3 or 4 years ago. So if we put inflation in there, the 75,000 probably is 80,000. So I would say that both of you hit it right on the head. What they found is that anything over $80,000 did not necessarily increase a person's happiness. Okay. And a lot of people don't know that. I have to be honest with you. I don't know. This statistic, when I read it, I was like, really? Like, I don't know. I think another 100 grand would make me happy. I'm just being honest. But again, I'm not going to go against Harvard, right? So when defining happiness, this was anything. When defining happiness, excuse me, people had in their head that if you make 80,000, let's say, or more, that or around 80,000, sorry, that you were okay, and that anything over that, that if you're fighting and stuff, that it might be less about money and more that money might be a symptom of a bigger issue. So I do always tell people when it comes to happiness, happiness comes from you. It doesn't come from other people. It may be 100K for me. Oh, it might be more than that. I live in Philadelphia. I live in right outside of Philadelphia now, so it's probably even more than that. But we'll talk about that another time. But 50% of happiness, approximately 50% of happiness is genetic. Did you guys know that? And about 40% is trying to be happy, and 9%, I'm sorry, 50% of happiness is genetic, 40% is learned. Okay. The other 10% is up in the air. So it could go both ways. I think that that's really interesting. And again, this is a Harvard statistic. So that means that half of our ability to be happy is genetic. That's crazy, right? So the minute you're born, you already have a 50-50 shot. And I don't know if any of you have seen kids grow up and stuff like that. There are certain kids that are like, I don't know. Can you be 90% of that and 10%? 90% what? Genetic and 10% learned? Truth, you're a goof. Just the Harvard University study saying that there is a huge part of happiness that comes from genetics. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. If you're in a relationship and you don't feel like you're able to make the other person happy, again, there's only so much that you're responsible for somebody else's happiness. You're responsible for your own happiness. You're responsible for your own mental health. If you think that things aren't going right, or if you're struggling in any area, seeking help is obviously the right thing to do. I am not going to say I'm 90% walking around. What the heck? Yeah, right. So I just want you guys to know that, because a lot of times we blame ourselves, or we'll be like, why did that person cheat? What did I not give them? Am I not the same? Da, 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 da. All that stuff. And maybe we'll do a whole segment just on cheating one day, but because I know a lot of people deal with that. But again, cheating isn't about you. It's about the other person. So again, what I'm known for is one of my sayings. The good news is it's probably not about you. The bad news is it's probably not about you. And I hope that makes sense to all of you. Whether you're talking about your parenting style, your adult parenting style, it's here. I'll put it in here. Truth, can you put my email in the chat for love, please? Thank you. It's just my name at Gmail. Okay, so real quick. So if you join a club that meets as little as once a month, that equals the same happiness as doubling your income. Let me repeat that. Okay. Joining a club, and that could be a Facebook group. Okay. Joining a club that meets as little as once a month equals the same happiness as doubling your income. Why do you think that is? What do you guys think? Why do you think that? I'm going to rate my thing in chat. There you go. There's my email. So it's because of acceptance and belonging. Okay. It's because of acceptance and belonging. When we're a part of a group like this, and I will tell you this, you guys, since you're online right now, I see like 2 or 3 people that are talking in the chat, and the amount of people in here are 6, right? So that means that there's 4 other people that are listening that might not be writing in chat, which is fine. As long as people hear the message, I'm okay with that. But I will tell you this, when we listen, and we'll talk about it afterwards, Truth. I don't know how to give you a wrench, but I'll give you one. I'll give you one. But just so you guys know, if you're listening to this and you're not participating, you put yourself at a higher risk of developing depression. I don't know if people know that. If you're going to go online and you're going to be part of a community, make sure that you're part of that community. So make sure that you're also participating. Make sure that the people are engaging with you. If somebody's not engaging with you in a positive way, leave that group. Go find another group. There's thousands of groups online. Love was just saying that she doesn't know where my channel came from. It just popped up on her feed. She clicked on it, and now there you go, right? So Love could be part of our group. Like, find a group in life where you belong, and those people will give you the support. And chances are, if those people are in a similar group, they also want that same belongingness, and they also want that same reinforcement that everything's going to be okay. And also keep in mind that, like, if you just take our little group for example, we're all of like different ages. Some of us are the same age, but we're all different ages. We all have different life experiences. Oh, Corey, look who's listening. I should have known that you were one of the bastards listening, not typing. I'm just kidding, Corey. I love you. Corey's one of my students, you guys. And he's awesome. And I just admitted that on tape, Corey. So you can go back. Except for on Sunday, next Sunday, he's not going to be awesome. We talk football shit like I can't even tell you. Like shit. Like if somebody ever saw our text messages or whatever, they would be like, oh my God. All right. So does that have to do with social media too? Yes, Corey, that has to do with social media too. So when you go on somebody's TikTok, when you go on somebody's Instagram, their Facebook, and you're just lurking and you're not writing anything, you increase your chances of becoming depressed. And if you think about it, let me give you an example. So and Corey, I don't know if you were one of these people. I just am using you because I know you. So I know that you know me enough to know whatever. So, oh, she did. Truth tried to give everybody off the day after the Eagles won. Please, Truth. If anybody was not getting a day off, it was Corey. He's not in my class this semester, but if he was, I would have told everybody to have off, and I would have made Corey come. I would have taken him out of the email thing on purpose. And then I would have drove to work and wrote Eagles real big on the board and let him sit in class until he realized that I canceled it. That's like mine and Corey's relationship. We're cool like that. But Corey, I do want to tell you, because I really do care. Yes, this has everything to do with social media. When you go on social media and you're only like looking, this is another thing, you guys, people on social media, they don't tell you the backstory. I will tell you this. I tell my students this too. I'll never forget when I first started doing this, I was seeing a couple, and I'll never forget this, you guys. And they were telling me like the day before at a family function, they got into this huge blow up, and they wound up like spitting on each other at some point. And I was like, wait, what? And in counseling, you can never change your face. So you have to have like a poker face the whole time, because you never want to be like, which is probably one of the reasons I'd rather be a teacher, because I can make those faces as a teacher, but not as a therapist, right? So why am I telling you this? Because the next day on Facebook, they must have just received their paid family portraits. You paid thousands of dollars for family portraits. You're going to want to put them up for everybody to see, right? So they put them up on Facebook, and everybody's writing underneath how wonderful of a family they are and how beautiful of a family. And someday I hope to have a relationship like you two, and blah, 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 blah. And the whole time I wanted to write underneath, they're the last people that you want to emulate, okay? They spit on each other. They disrespect each other all the time. And just because you see this beautiful picture of them and their kids, does not mean that that's the reality at home. And I want you guys to always remember that. So because it's the truth, right, love? It's the truth. Um, if you just look at what people put out there, you're only taking in what they want you to see. You're not really taking in the truth. So keep that in mind too. So if you think about it and you're only going on other people's pages to see what they're up to, now you have no idea that this couple is a horrible couple together. You just see their family photo, which of course is beautiful. They paid thousands of dollars for it. It better be beautiful, right? And that's all you see. I could see how that might make somebody feel depressed, right? Because now it's very deceptive. So now you're looking at it and you're kind of like, excuse me, you're kind of like, now you're more sad. You're like, let me just stay in bed all day. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have this or whatever, not realizing that your relationship could be so much more healthy than the one that you're trying to compare it to. So keep that in mind as well. People only let you see what they want you to see. Okay. Even people that trauma dump, they're only telling you what they want you to know. So keep that in mind and don't compare yourself to others, because that's when we tend to become unhappy. So real quick, just back to my happiness notes. Just so you know, approximately 51% of Americans report being happy. So that's only one over half, which is crazy. 40% report trying to be happy. If you guys had to pick one, if anybody wants to share, if you could pick between happy, trying to be happy, or you're on the struggle bus, which one are you on? And 9% are struggling. I call it the struggle bus. So 51% report being happy, 40% report trying to be happy, and 9% say they're struggling. And this is struggling to be happy, not struggling like financially or in love, just to be happy in general. So I'm curious to think what you guys have to say about that. Okay. Do you guys want to know? Wait, what's it say? Can you explain the warrior? Ah, there you go. He wants him to understand it. So, Corey, I did talk about this a little bit in the beginning, but just in case anybody's coming in, the warrior, Corey just referenced my warrior warrior theory. The warrior is a little girl who watches their parents fight. And again, when I say fight, you guys, the people that spit on each other technically didn't get into a fist fight, right? But I can't think of anything more disrespectful. So, in that situation, that's very embarrassing for a kid. It makes a kid feel very like they don't know what to expect. Consistency is key in parenting. And if you don't know what to expect when you get home every day, that can leave you very anxious and even avoidant in some situations. You might start finding that you're joining clubs after school because you don't want to get home until, later. You want to try to miss that stuff. So for the little girl in school, instead of thinking about who she wants to hook up with or date or whatever, she's worrying. So she's a little worrier. And instead of doing the things that are age appropriate for her age as a young girl, she's thinking of adult issues because unfortunately she's seeing adult issues when she gets older. For the little boy, the warrior that watches, especially when a little warrior watches his mom get hit by somebody else, whether it's their dad, a stepdad, a boyfriend, whatever the case, another girlfriend, whatever the case may be, right? That little warrior goes to school, and instead of talking to his friends about what time we're meeting to play basketball or baseball or whatever we're doing, I'm thinking so much in my head about someday I'm going to be big enough, I'll be strong enough, I'll kick his ass, he's not going to hurt my mom forever. And we wind up getting that warrior mentality. The problem is, to Corey's little brother, the warriors and the warriors often find each other. And when they find each other, it could be an explosive relationship. And a big part of it is just that you wind up, they're more likely to repeat the history only because neither one of them, if you're still a warrior and a warrior in adulthood, neither one of them have gotten the therapy or the counseling that they need to get to a secure attachment. And therefore, yes, a little girl can be a warrior, truth. Absolutely. So when I say warriors and warriors, you could have a boy that's a warrior and a girl that's a warrior. I'm glad that True said that. The point is that they're insecurely attached and they grow up and they find each other. And that's the important part. And when you find each other in adulthood and neither one of you know the healthy way to be in a relationship, you're more likely to repeat history because it's what you know. You also are more likely to trauma bond, especially when you have similar upbringing. So let's say you both watched your parents get beat up, right? Now it's like we have a story that even though I didn't know you growing up, you didn't know me growing up, we both went through this. And because we both went through this and we're around the same age, we must have a lot in common. And you could argue that maybe you do. But on the other side, you can also argue that that's even more of a reason to make sure that you are getting to secure attachment before you get into a relationship that lasts or that you want to last for a long time. Corey, if you or your brother have any questions, please feel free to write them. I'm also going to, I know you're not going to come up, but if you want to get crazy and come up, you don't have to put your picture on. But if you want to come up and like even ask questions or whatever, please feel free to do so. People don't mind. Anybody that wants to come up, please feel free. I hesitate saying that because I don't know who's listening. See True says, Corey, get up there. Corey, get up here so people could see us, how we talk to each other. I won't be mean to you, I promise. I'll try. You could be mean to me back. So this is another thing. So I'm going to stop not begging, but I'm going to stop saying to Corey to come up because I don't want him to join in the future and not participate because he's afraid that I'm going to ask him to come up, if that makes sense. So just know if I ever put the StreamYard out there and I ask people to come up, that I still want you to participate. There's no love loss. The love's already lost with Corey, so we're good. No, I'm just kidding, Corey. There's no love lost. I would never, ever, a lot of people don't feel comfortable getting up on a panel, and I am totally okay with that. I'm the one that started this live, so I don't mind being the one that's talking up here. So I do want to make sure that people like Corey still come back. So Corey, you don't have to come up here if it makes you feel uncomfortable. If you want to, though, please feel free to do so that you can ask me questions that maybe you're thinking of that I teach in class. Oh, Corey, are you still here? Hopefully you are. If you're still here, the whole reason I went live is because this morning I woke up and saw Beth. You know Beth, like the one that I show in class, Child of Rage. I saw that one of my friends that does live streaming, Pat and Paul, that's great. So do I. The people I saw live streaming had this up and they were talking about Beth. But one of the things that they didn't see was that there's a second episode to the episode that they were watching. And in the second episode, I should try and pull it up and just say, hopefully I won't get a strike. Let's see what happens. So Child of Rage is the name of the one that I show my class. And in Child of Rage, they literally show Beth talking to so let me just show you this real quick before I show you that. So with Child of Rage, let me just show you this real quick. Share screen. All right, I show a longer version of this in class, but just to give you a brief, like, first of all, real quick, you guys, before I show you this, and you already know Beth's story because a lot of you saw it today. If you didn't, Beth was abused for the first 19 months of her life. She was being sexually abused by her dad. And this right here, so what you guys watched in a different live stream was very well written and it was very well researched. And there's a second part to it, which I think is very important to make sure that is followed up on. But right here, I show a lot of this part in class because when we talk about abnormal psychology and abnormal behavior, this is some of the things that you'll see in childhood. The truth is here, I have to be honest with you, I was a little bit disappointed to see that they had Beth speaking to a male, especially since she was sexually abused by a male, and they're taping it nonetheless, right, to show for educational purposes. So I want people to keep that in mind too. But I want you to take a look. So on Beth's face, we have something called contempt. So there's 8, we're born with 8 basic emotions. And this was another thing, I don't know whose live stream it was, but somebody was talking about anger being a secondary emotion. And I think in the process, and I don't know who that was, but whoever it was, I think what they meant was like in the realm of true crime and like rage being a secondary emotion for like murder or something. But just so you guys know, because I want to make sure that there's never misinformation here, you're born with 7 basic emotions, and anger is one of them. Okay. So anger is one of the 8 basic emotions that you're born with. And um, just so you guys are aware, you develop all of your other, we call them secondary emotions, after um, about 18 months. So at 18 months is when you start to understand that you're separate from other people. And that's when you start to develop secondary emotions. Let me give you an example. Jealousy is a secondary emotion. Until I know at around 18 months that I'm separate from you. And what does that mean? Take a 12-month-old, put them in front of a mirror, and have them talk to the baby in the mirror. Because even if you tell them that that's them, and even if you're in the mirror with them, they'll look at you kind of like, huh, like why? And they'll look back and forth almost confused. But until around 18 months, and again, this is just an approximation. For some kids, it's sooner, for some kids, it's later. But at around 18 months, we start to get the identity that we are separate than our primary caregiver. With that being said, once I know that I'm different from you, I now could be jealous of you or be envious and want what you have. So even if you babysit kids, think of if you were babysitting a 1-year old or two, like a 1.5 year old, and then you have other kids that are like in their toddler years or early elementary years. Long story short, you can give them all a Happy Meal and the 1-year old a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, and the 1-year old knows nothing. They don't care. They don't even think about anything. However, once they get that once they get that they're separate from others and they have that theory of mind, now they're looking over and they're like, wait, I want a Happy Meal. Like, I want a toy too. So they might not be able to verbalize it, but this is when they start throwing their sandwich all over and stomping their hands and feet in protest. That's a protest. That's the kid saying, I'm trying to tell you something, but the only thing I could do is cry. So for the first year of life, crying is the only way that they can communicate for the most part. So it's not until you understand that you're second from other people that you get secondary emotions. So I do want you to know that anger is a primary emotions. It's one of the 7 basic emotions that we're born with, but I don't want to bore you because this is not class. So let me just show you part of Beth's this is the actual interview that she did with this therapist.
Who?
My brother.
Okay. Do you do it a little
Yes,
bit?
have you hurt anybody?
A lot.
Yeah.
Okay. And what are you trying to do to your brother?
Oh, hold on, you guys. I'm so glad now you can say it. There we go. Oh, Abby, you're listening at work. Abby's another favorite of mine, student. I love my students. They really are so supportive, you guys. Abby, we're talking about Beth a little bit because I seen somebody else doing a live stream on Beth and I needed to course correct a little bit.
Kill him.
So she's talking
Why
about
do you want
wanting
your
to kill her
brother to
brother.
die?
Because I was hurt so bad, and I don't want to be around people.
Okay. Who else would you like to stick pins into?
Mommy and Daddy.
What would you like to have happen to them?
Die.
Jesus could have lived, so Israel.
Okay, so over there, she literally says that she wants mommy and daddy to die. Now, this is the thing, you guys. So Beth was being abused, and if you're being abused, you could see how it's going to be hard for her to accept another parent. So I'm going to jump forward a little bit. There's like a few different spots that I want to show you.
Very long until she began showing some signs of perhaps even some abuse. There was a nightmare that she had, and the nightmare was about a man who was falling on her and hurting her with a part of himself.
Tell me about your birth father. What was that nightmare like?
When he touched my vaginas
Okay.
until it bled, hurted a lot until it bled, and wouldn't feed me a lot. He'd hit on me, wouldn't be very nice to me.
How old were you?
1.
And in your nightmare, Nightmare, what happens in nightmare? What happens in the dream?
I'm in the house upstairs.
And then what happens, Beth?
When he comes upstairs and hurt.
Okay, so this is the closest to an emotion that you're going to see from Beth in this particular video. So with Beth here, she is being abused, obviously, and she's now abusing her little brother because of it. Remember that when kids talk about their dreams, sometimes it's easier to talk about abuse if you're a kid through a dream, if you will, like quote unquote, or by drawing.
How do you feel when you talk about this?
Scared.
Okay, did you guys notice that she just said scared, but she didn't really look scared? So she was doing the beginning of what we call masking. So she learned, and there you could see her. She looked confused, like, how do I answer this? And she's like scared. Like it was almost as if she was asking a question, like, should I be scared? So that is very typical of somebody in this situation.
Where's your birth father? What's he doing?
He's right there, and there's his hand. His hand's right there.
Where?
Right there. You can't hardly see it because it's green.
What's it touching?
My vagina.
And what is your birth father doing?
Hurting it.
Your face looks sad. Can you tell me about that?
It's crying.
Notice she called herself
That's with the tears.
Beth had endured.
Okay, so over here, and again, trigger warning, I probably should have said, but with Beth, she had endured years of abuse. And I did come to find out later that her and Jonathan weren't the only kids in the family. So the documentary makes it seem as though they're the only two kids. Apparently, there were older children as well. And just Beth and her brother were pulled from the family.
Endured severe neglect and abuse as a child. Her birth mother died when she was 1. Because of these early childhood experiences, Beth never developed a sense of conscience, love, or trust for anyone. The early sexual abuse by her birth father would cause her to exhibit inappropriate sexual behavior, especially toward her brother.
Does your brother have private parts?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is his private parts?
Penis and butt.
Mm-hmm. And what do you do with your brother with his private parts, Beth?
I heard it.
Tell me about it. What do you do?
Now, I pinch it. Squeeze it. Kick it.
Okay, so real quick, she obviously pinches, squeezes it, and kicks it because she's being abused herself by a man who has those same parts. So that makes sense of why she would want to do the same thing to someone else. But at this age, again, I think it's important to note that she isn't understanding that her brother obviously didn't do this to her and that she was taken out of that situation. So this goes to show that as your brain is developing, and I don't know if you guys know this, but if you're my student, you know this, your brain develops obviously till you're 25, but most of your brain development occurs from conception to your 6th birthday, okay? So Beth is still, I believe, around 5 year or whatever, and it's important to note that her brain is, your brain, okay, so let me just say it this way. At birth, your brain's 25% developed. By the end of your 5th birthday, your brain is 90% developed. Your brain only develops by 10% from 6 to 25 years old. So most of your brain development occurs before the age of 6. So keep that in mind too.
When you do things to your brother's private parts, what does he say?
Stop.
Okay, tell me that.
Well, he says stop, but I don't stop.
Do you hurt him?
A lot.
Okay.
And take notice she has no emotion.
Would you like to do that to other boys?
when I caught her with Jonathan one morning, she was molesting him. He was crying and his pants were down, and I said, Beth, what's happening? And she said, I pulled his penis and put my finger up his anus. And I said, didn't he say to stop? And she said, yeah, he did. And I said, did you? And she said, no.
Have you
Real quick, let me just tell you guys that it talks about, like Beth says, vagina, and so just so you guys know, you're supposed to refer to children's parts as what they are. So we don't call our elbow a cookie, right? So why would we call our vagina a cookie? So when the mom says that Beth said anus at first, I have to be honest, with like many of my students, I was kind of like, wait, what? She's 5. She said anus. The thing is that as being an adopted child, she might have been taught the proper vocabulary for the different body parts, and that could be very real that that's what she said.
ever rubbed your private parts?
Mhm.
Wait to hear this part.
Do you do it a lot?
A lot.
How much do you do that?
About every single day, and that
So she masturbates daily.
I did it every single day until it got real bad and messed up, and I had to go to the doctor, and I did not like it.
What do you mean by real bad?
Well, it looked real raw, got all kinds of boo-boos on it, germs,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of stuff from my hand.
And it bled?
hmm
She started to masturbate at inappropriate times. I remember one time.
Okay, so let me just real quick jump back and explain that. So they talk about her masturbating at inappropriate times. So some of you are probably watching this, and one thing I learned about having this little community of ours is that we are all raised very differently depending on where we are located in the United States. So there are a lot of people that a lot of this might be like what? This little kid, like they're talking about masturbating, like what's happening? If your kid, so just so you know, all of your nerve endings come to life at around 3 years old in your private area. So if you work in a daycare, for example, it is not uncommon for the 3 or 4-year-old room when they're trying to fall asleep while they're self-soothing to look like they're humping their cot. A lot of that just is literally their nerve endings come to light. It usually happens by accident at first where they bump into something. They're like, oh, that feels good. Then they bump into it again. And then if you could picture in your head bumping into it multiple times, now you look like you're humping your cot, right? And I'll never forget that when I was a lot of my students' ages, I went into class and I asked my teacher, I was like, are all these kids being abused? And that's when she was like, no, Jamie. And she started to teach me more about your the way your body works. With Beth here, she was masturbating outside and stuff. So like for Beth, although you might think that she wanted to be completely alone, her cries for help were so out there. So she was doing things like masturbating in a parking lot to get attention from somebody else. So I almost feel like she was hurting so bad inside that she was trying to react or become reactive, right? Reactive attachment disorder. So she did many things where she would get a reaction, and that was one of them. She does say, and when she talks about it, she talks about like, she says it with like a smile. I don't know. Oh, it says part 2. So let me just see, because there's 1 or 2 other things I do want to bring up.
When we were at the hospital waiting for Tim to come out, he was there visiting. And Beth and John were in the back seat, and I turned around, and she had her
Put any
legs
questions you
spread and
have.
was masturbating in a public parking lot. And I had tried to explain to her numerous times before that's private area. You don't do it in public places. And gone over that with her, and it never seemed to faze her. And
Julie, how often would your daughter masturbate?
daily, constantly.
Do you have animals, Beth?
4 of them.
Pay attention to
Can you
this.
tell me their names?
Clyde, Shooky, Darcy, and Annie. And Daddy said a day ago that there was a stray cat who did not have a home, so Daddy was taking care of it and took it to the vet when he had a flight to go.
And what do you do to the animals, Beth?
Stick them with pins.
So she sticks them with pins. So why would she stick them with pins? Because she's trying to hurt them. Abuse to animals is one of the signs of psychopathy and looking at kids with this lack of conscience. So she does talk about these baby birds at one point. Let me see if I can find the baby bird part so that you guys get a better understanding.
Do you stick them a little bit or a lot?
A lot.
What did you do then?
I took them out.
Okay, so this is
When
the baby birds.
When you found some baby birds in a tree, what did you do then?
I took them out.
Mm-hmm. And what did Mom say to you?
That the mother will not come back if somebody touches her baby.
Mm-hmm. Are the baby birds kind of small? Can you describe them for me?
Well, they don't have their eyes open, but they can hear me, and they look up.
Are they?
There's another part of the video where she admits wanting to kill them, her family, but she says that she would do it in the dark so that they could hear her, but that they couldn't see her. So that means a lot to me as a therapist.
Kind of helpless little baby birds?
This part says everything. Look, she doesn't know
Can
how
they
to
fly?
No.
Can they run away?
respond.
Yes.
They can? Are they
Honestly, I don't think she knew how to answer this question because I don't think she gave them a chance to run.
easy to catch or hard to catch?
Hard.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to remember. With the baby birds, what did you do?
Took them out of the tree.
And what did you do with them?
Played around too rough. Also, when at the end, I picked it up and I thought it was Dad, and I came to say, "Mommy, is this bird dead?" And she said, she called Daddy and said, "Tim," and
Did you see that smile? That was contempt.
and Daddy came and I think I remember that they said yes.
Mm-hmm. And so did the little baby birds die?
I don't know.
You don't
She knows.
remember?
I just remember that I think I remember that Mommy and Daddy said the last bird we got was dead.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so there you go. So that was one of the points I wanted to point out. This is the thing, you guys. This doesn't make her the most evil person in the world or whatever people were saying earlier. This makes her a traumatized child who's been sexually abused, who now is, she finally gets adopted and they bring her to treatment, which should have been happening long before. In this sense, when it comes to the baby birds, let me just explain this real quick. The mom tells Beth beforehand, don't touch them. If you touch the baby birds, their mom won't they won't have that same smell anymore and the moms won't come back to them. So she'll leave them there pretty much to die. So what does Beth do? She not only touches the baby birds, but she takes them out and plays with them until she plays with them too rough and they die, right? So as a therapist, I'm thinking, okay, like what's happening here? And I guess what you could say here is if she can't have a mom, why should they? Right. But it also shows cruelty to animals. Imagine taking little birds out of their nest and she broke all of their necks. Okay. So she broke all of the birds' necks, including the moms. Okay. And she like has no emotion here. Again, this is another thing that you would do as a reaction. So reaction attachment. Again, I thought that this was important because of what you guys were watching earlier, but I also want to show you real quick. Beth. Oh, what was the name of that guy you were watching? I'm going to put N Doctor. Let's see what it comes up. Because I know which one I want. No, I wanted to be on YouTube. What am I doing? Anyway, I'll stop this share and I'll look for it while I talk to you guys. Okay. Oh, So the mom in this next part, I took it down, but the mom starts talking about how she turns around and Beth was masturbating in front of Jonathan. At one point, they talk about how Beth tells the doctor how mommy and daddy had to go down and stop her and this, that, and the other. Just before I show you this other thing, I do want to show you. So I heard them saying earlier about Camille. Okay. And again, when I saw this, I was like, oh my gosh, I wish I was there for this. This is Camille, you guys. Okay. So this is the woman who eventually Beth winds up living with. So Beth was adopted by somebody else, but then winds up going under the wing of this therapist, which is just so wrong on so many levels, from an adoption level, from a developmental level, and especially from a therapist-client relationship level. It's completely wrong, and it can further traumatize the child. But just so you guys see, I will tell you that I do think that when they took Beth to therapy, that they did a good job as far as placing her. And let me just show you what it looks like, and you guys could see how Beth changes completely by the end of this.
Trust. And because they don't trust, they don't allow anybody to be boss of them. So we take complete control. They are not boss of anything. They have to ask to get a drink of water. They have to ask to go to the bathroom. They have to ask to leave our sight. Part of that is because we cannot trust them because of the damage that they've done before.
Beth, would you like to say grace, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this good day and everybody doing good. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Amen. They believe that they're evil. They believe they're from the devil. They believe that they are not a person of value. And we have to change that, and we have to build that from a child who's nothing, who's a bad kid in their own mind, to a child who's valuable and loving, and they see themselves as that.
So again, seeing yourself as loved and being able to be loved.
You don't have to bite.
So this is the thing, you guys. Equestrian therapy and animal therapy is huge for a kid when learning how to retrust. So Love was asking, how can you overcome this extreme therapy? And I do think that the parents did a good job of knowing that she clearly needed help. And then, but it was so bad at one point, you guys, that they had to take Beth out of the house because they were afraid that she would hurt herself or her adopted parents or her brother Jonathan. So it got so bad that the parents had to put a lock on her door from the outside. So they pretty much locked her in the bedroom at night. And to a kid that already feels out of control, that could be, I mean, I don't know, that could feel very, very out of control. However, this woman, Camille, takes some extreme measures, and I'm just going to show you real quick. So they go to church and stuff. They show that, but I want you guys to see the emotion of Beth's face
Doing
towards the
things
end.
with the other children. We don't worry about that anymore. There's no alarm on her door at night now. She sleeps in the same room with my own daughter, and I trust her that much.
Real quick, sorry to stop that. How many of you would trust Beth to sleep with their children at this point? So not only, and this is another thing that was a red flag to me when I was showing this to class. I was like, why is Camille's kids living in the same household? But then I tried to give her the benefit of the doubt, and I was like, well, maybe it's because she has to give these kids 24-hour care. So she created that type of household. Nope. Okay. So I don't know. Just watch.
She brushes the dogs, and I trust her that much because she has earned that trust. She's learned it. She has a heart, and she has a love inside, and she feels bad when she does something now. In the past, because she didn't have a conscience, she didn't feel anything when she did something bad. There was just no feeling there. And now she does feel bad, and it shows in her face.
I believe that Beth can make it. She's got a really bright mind. She's got a good heart now, which has done a lot of healing. She's got a really super set of parents. They're powerful, they're knowledgeable, they're motivated. She's done a lot of good work with you in therapy with Canal and with myself. She wants to heal, and that's she has a family that really cares
So
about.
do you see this? So again, so when I would show my students, we would end here and I'd be like, you guys, I did my research, which I did, and Beth turns out to be good. Like she got the treatment she needed. Oh, hold on. I don't know why that just happened. Why am I not signed into my YouTube? Anyway, so I found the other thing that I wanted to show you guys. So earlier, you guys were watching the first part of that. I don't even know what it's called. Let me see. Born to Rage is what it's called. So I'm going to put that in here. There was a part 2 of this where they have a doctor come on and talk about reactive attachment disorder. You guys already saw part 1, which I was so glad that 12 gauge showed you guys. But in part 2, the doctor goes on to explain it a little bit better. So hold on, let me just say. I just want to make sure we're at the right one. No, this is the one that you guys watched earlier with that. If anybody wasn't there to watch that on that channel, this is the type of therapy we're talking about. Let me just show you so you guys understand. And they called this, they did a horrible job because I feel like they wound up calling this reactive attachment and or attachment therapy, and it's really not. But this is how abusive this was, why I try to find the other one.
Holding therapy, also known as rage reduction therapy. This is where someone forcibly hugs or cuddles a child, often against their will, until they finally relent. It involves some other practices that are, let's say, quite triggering. Take a look.
What happened?
I'm not sure.
You're not sure. I gave up. How about I gave up? See, this is your life.
So this is a
This is
therapist.
your life. Where are I supposed to be? This is your life. You want to fight for your family? You want to stay in this family or not? Or should we just give up now? What do you want to do? You want to give up? You want to whine and moan?
No.
Well, what is it? Yes or no?
No.
Then say it like you mean it.
No, Neil.
No, Neil, what? Oh, is this the kind of stuff that you do all the time, huh? I forgot. I don't know. Play stupid. Poor little Stevie.
Trigger warning.
That's the kind of stuff. How'd it go last night for you?
Not good enough.
The way it usually goes, right? Because this is the way your life goes. How many times do you think I want to tell you to look in my eyes, huh? How many times do people have to tell you to do things? Oh, I don't know, Neil. How you feeling right now? How'd you feel last night, huh?
Yeah. So he
Yeah.
gets worse.
I can!
I like to kill you, motherfucker!
Open your eyes and look at me and say it.
I like to kill you, motherfucker!
Again.
I like to kill you, motherfucker!
When I say open your eyes, I mean open them. Got it?
Got it!
How do you feel?
Mad, Neil!
I'd like to kill you, right?
Right!
Say it.
I like to kill you, Neil!
Show me. Show me all the mad inside of you. Look at me. What do you want to call me right now, huh?
I jerk!
Louder than that.
Jerk!
Eyes open.
Jerk!
Again.
Jerk!
Louder than that.
Jerk!
Good. What would you like to do to me right now?
Hit you!
Where?
Anywhere, just like I hit you!
Then you say it.
I wish I could hit you, Neil!
Again.
I wish I could hit you, Neil!
Eyes open.
I wish I could hit you, Neil!
Good. Again.
I wish I could hit you, Neil!
Because you argue with everybody about everything. Right?
Right!
Because you never accept responsibility for what you do or for what you feel. Right?
Okay, so not to traumatize anybody more, I'm going to stop that there. Just so you guys know, that's called, if you look up Born to Rage, that was in the first part that they watched today. I want to show you this part because I think this was even more.
5 words you pronounce wrong. It is now known as type 3 diabetes.
This is part 2 of Born into Rage. Please watch part 1 on this channel first.
Tell me about the knives. Where did you get them?
Without proper help and care.
Affectionate relationships, sometimes
neglect. So hopefully that paints a picture of how there's a big overlap. They're two completely distinct disorders.
The children in this old film are being videoed as a part of a study that aimed to examine the effects of maternal deprivation on young children. The kids selected for the study are children who had been in a system that saw them going from home to home, making zero positive social connections, never really attaching themselves to anyone or anything. Most of these children have endured a withdrawn life for so long that it dealt severe injury to the child's ability to establish affectionate relationships, sometimes even leaving the innocent kid with deep wounds that may never fully be repaired.
Look at how they just hit each other.
After all, how can you repair something that never existed? The lack of stable relationships
So earlier, real quick, when we were talking about attachment disorder, what he's talking about here, he said, how do you know what you have if it never really existed? What he's talking about is that cloth mother I was talking about. The wire mother is the one that makes you eat. So they clearly are all being fed because they're physically alive, but they don't have a cloth mother, the one that they run to. So when that little kid just got bashed in the face, the other little kid didn't feel bad about it. And the little kid that was physically hurt starts crying. This is when most kids would run to their primary caregiver and have them kiss it better. I don't know about you, but when my kids were younger, they could get hurt. There could have been an eyeball popped out. If I kissed their eyeball better and was like, you're good, they'd be like, okay. And they'd be like, I'm okay, because they believe in their parent, right? They had trust in me that if I kissed it better and I said it was okay, it's okay. Just like if I would have reacted and been like, they would have probably freaked out even more. So kids do look for that. But when the kid doesn't have that at all, that kid just stood there and took it.
Relationships coupled with constant recurring separation leaves these young lives looping in a state of both rejection and self-induced isolation.
Okay, so in Beth's case, while she shared, these psychopathic traits with, an adult that may be considered psychopathic, you wouldn't consider her psychopathic. But could that, without proper help and care, could that have evolved or devolved? I don't know what way to kind of say it. Could that have turned into an adult that would be psychopathic?
Yeah, absolutely. So it already damaged her to a very significant degree, and we see that by the very fact that even after she was adopted, these behaviors continued. So even though she had, much more supportive, loving parents, she still had these personality traits. So it almost took her a while to unlearn all the horrific abuse that she would have picked up and modeled from her father, and then to relearn what is a normal human reaction, what is a normal human relationship, how do you express warmth, affection, love. So those things, because she was in a more conducive environment, plus the therapy, I think was another big part, she relearned normal human behavior. That had she continued in such an environment, or other patients that I've certainly seen who've ended up, in the criminal justice system, who have just had a horrific background that didn't relent, that continued to face physical and sexual and emotional abuse. Absolutely, that's the exact conditions that will grow a psychopath.
Okay, yeah, interesting. And would it be safe to say that Beth, at the time, in place of what should have been love, care, empathy, sympathy, even, would it be fair to say that in place of those things, she learned hate, aggression?
Okay, so just for the sake of not getting copyrighted, and I also want to say, everybody please go over to give this person love afterwards. I don't want to get copyrighted about this, but this is such an important topic that I hope, what is it, Mr. I can't think of his name, but I'll figure it out in a second. His name is The Disturbing Truth. So I will put it in the description after, The Disturbing Truth. This right here, what they're showing you, this story became so popular that a movie was made out of it, okay? And if you notice, Beth had a pin in her hand, and that was Annie, her dog, that she would poke because Annie would cry from it. But listen to what he's talking about. So he's saying that because they got Beth help when they did, just like I said earlier, that's why she was able to turn it around. However, if you don't get help, this can most definitely turn into psychopathy.
Violence,
Sadism.
really. Sexual promiscuity, I guess is how you might characterize it. Is it safe to say that where love and care would have been, those things were replacing it at the time?
Yeah, absolutely. So children, especially younger children, they tend to emulate or model the behavior that they see from caregivers, from parents, sometimes to a lesser degree even from siblings. So it's a very well-known fact, completely separate to reactive attachment disorder, completely separate to psychopathy. In fact, completely separate psychiatric diagnoses. It's just a well-known fact that people who are victims of both physical and sexual abuse, there's not all of them by any means, but there's an increased risk that they commit those behaviors. And part of that is just modeling. So literally a kid does or copies what his mother or father does. And part of it's because they think that is normal. So they think that violence is a normal way of conflict resolution. If somebody's got a different opinion to me, or if I want something different, something to eat, or I want to watch something different on TV, I will do what Dad did to me when he got angry. So he used his fists, so I'll use my fists. And in a similar way, children who go through a lot of sexual abuse, especially prolonged, repeated sexual abuse, tend to become promiscuous, as you say. And that's because it's nothing to do with the morality. It's because they see overt sex as a normal way of showing affection. Especially if it.
All right, I need to stop it there so that I can interject on here. So what he's talking about is that, and this is where Freud, like we get weirded out by him sometimes, but he talks about sex and aggression. I don't know, again, I don't even know why I just brought that up, but I guess because of the way he reminded me of this. But what happened is in Beth's childhood, she learned that a normal way to fight aggression or to, deal with her brother and stuff was to do it the way that she was taught. So it wasn't until she went away and got help that she was able to learn the proper way or the right way to respond. So she was reacting, not responding to a situation. I invited 12 Gauge. I hope he shows up. And if he does, 12 Gauge, I'm going to put the link in the chat. I would love 12 Gauge to jump up here because he started this morning, and I really felt so compelled to, continue it because it's such an important topic.
It suffered it from their parents. They think that's the natural way of how you show somebody that you have feelings for them.
Beth basically couldn't understand why she wasn't allowed to kill her brother and stick pins in the dogs and murder people. It seemed to me at one point that it was almost like this game that Beth was playing to win. She just didn't seem to understand, why can't I do this? Why can't I be? I suppose she didn't know what evil is. And is it evil if it's all she ever knew?
I would argue that it's not evil, especially in the early years before she actually was old enough and mature enough to make her own moral guidance and compass. So, we've got kids. I know you've got kids as well. Part of being a parent is setting boundaries, is telling them off. So if your kid's, shouting or throwing food around the cafe, a good parent will tell that kid that that's unacceptable over and over again, and they eventually learn not only their moral, not only their sort of the boundaries of morality, but also the boundaries of acceptable human behavior. It's not acceptable to swear. It's not acceptable to shout. It's not acceptable to throw a tantrum. I'm sure we've all seen parents. I know I certainly have, who are not particularly good at that, and they seem to have these bratty kids.
This little boy was lost at a Chuck E. Cheese in New York. He continuously behaves horribly, and no one seems willing to stop him. He spits, he kicks, he roars, he takes, all without fear of consequence. The fact that the adults in this scenario did so little to restrain the kid and take control of the situation is appalling.
This is the
guys, I've never seen that before, and I don't know why I have.
Remove up to 10 times more earwax.
It's crazy.
Appalling, just like the fact that someone thought the correct response to this other little boy's shopping cart tantrum was to reward him with candy. Do not make this mistake with your children. It's crucial to their early development.
Okay, so this is so important, and if you're my student and you're still in here, I talk about this all the time. We talk about positive and negative reinforcement. In psychology, when you hear the words positive and negative, it probably means added and taken away, not good and bad. I'll say that again. Positive and negative in psychology probably means added or taken away, not good or bad. So there's reinforcement and punishment. Reinforcement is when we try to get a behavior to occur again. Punishment is when we try to stop a behavior. There's negative and positive reinforcement and negative and positive punishment. Let's do punishment real quick first because it's easier and quicker. So a positive punishment does not mean a good punishment. It means I'm giving you something as a result of bad behavior. So you have to do your chores this week. And in addition to that, you have to do X, Y, and Z chores. Okay. That would be a positive punishment. I gave you additional work that you don't want to do as a result of bad behavior. Negative punishment is what we see more often. And this is, I'm taking your cell phone away for a week or whatever the case may be because of bad behavior. Positive and negative reinforcement is taught wrong all the time by psychology instructors. And this is one of my biggest pet peeves. So positive reinforcement, an example would be, I give you $1 every time you get 100 on your spelling test. So I'm giving you something as a result of getting, like, I want you to repeat that behavior. I want you to continue to want to get 100. Maybe you're upping it to $5 now. Kids can't get shit with $1, right? So $5 for every time you bring home 100 on your test. That's going to make the kid want to study more and get 100 on their test so they can get more money. Negative reinforcement is not punishment, and it's taught that way all the time, and it drives me bananas. Negative reinforcement is taking something away and as a result of wanting a behavior to continue. So for example, when you get in the car, that annoying ding, 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 that when you put on your seatbelt. So the reinforced behavior here is putting on your seatbelt. They want you to put your seatbelt on. So to do so, they paired it with a very annoying ding that stops. So negative reinforcement. It stopped. That negative thing stops as a result of you putting on your seatbelt. That's what we want to happen. In situations over here, what they're talking about, you can positively reinforce bad behavior, and it happens all the time and it shouldn't be done. So for example, this kid over here is hysterical crying at the shopping, at the supermarket. Let's say mom or dad is, sees a neighbor in the next aisle. They don't want to be embarrassed. And this kid's asking for a candy bar and you told them no, right? So this kid freaks out. They're protesting and in hopes that you're going to be embarrassed and give in and give them that candy bar. If you do that, you just reinforced bad behavior, and you taught that kid that if I protest enough or if I have enough of a tantrum, that you'll give in and give me what I want. Therefore, the next time, let's say you learn in between that this isn't a good thing to do and you try to stop it, I would tell you to expect your kid to take it to the next level because you've already allowed it to occur once. They're more likely to do it again. So the best predictor of future behavior is past relevant behavior. So because the kid was able to protest before and then get what they wanted, they'll think that that's okay to do again. So make sure you do not make this mistake as a parent. Do not positively reinforce bad behavior. It takes a little bit longer to be a good parent as far as putting time and effort into it, but it is well worth it. They must have added this because I don't remember this. I do not remember that.
So it's like an extrapolation of that. She's never been told no. She's never been told that she couldn't push her brother or hit her brother. And in fact, probably witnessed her father do exactly that. So when she's very young, she's incapable of knowing what's right and wrong. It's only roughly around the age of 7 onwards that people even have, children even have the concept of good behavior versus bad behavior.
Well, this is kind of, segues into the reason that I decided to cover this case. I just finished a story about Ricky Neve. I'm sure you've heard of Ricky Neve.
I heard the name. I don't know many details, I'm afraid.
A very famous case. He was a 6-year-old boy, again, who was found dead. They thought it was the mom, Ruth Neve. She was tried, found innocent, but guilty of heavy neglect and abuse.
I don't remember.
It turned out to be another teenager in the area that committed the crime. And we're talking about a case that I think was like in 1994. So, they just caught him. They just sentenced him. But what was really interesting about that case was that after I posted the video, I had an interview with Rochelle Neve, which would have been Ricky's little sister. Now, at the time, she would have been like between the ages of 2 or 3. And she claims that she remembers the abuse that was done to her and Ricky and has some very specific traumatic memories that she brought up. Once I posted the interview, I had a lot of people saying, how the hell could she remember something that happened whenever she was 3? And that kind of inspired me to make this video, because I also suffered some child abuse at the hands of a babysitter when I was around 2, and I remember it. So I kind of had to hold back with feeling like, people saying this was a personal attack. And I thought, no, it reminded me of Beth Thomas immediately. And I thought, well, let's just do a video where we talk about this and how it does affect kids.
Children do not fully develop a sense of self until typically around 1.5 or 2 years of age.
You guys, I don't know if you remember, this guy, this is a little bit different than what I remember watching, but I'm so glad that it's like it turned out this way, because he's literally validating what I taught everybody in the beginning of the live stream. So at around 18 months or 1.5 years old is when you start to understand that you're separate from other people. And that is very important.
Having a sense of self, the I, separate from others, gives a place for memory to be organized and develop personal meaning. Kids begin forming explicit childhood memories around the 2-year mark, but the majority are still implicit memories until they're about 7. It's what researchers like Dr. Carol Peterson from Canada's Memorial University of Newfoundland call childhood amnesia. Implicit memories are memories that a child may not recall, but they mold behaviors and have a lifelong effect. Think of this as emotional recollection, but explicit memories, on the other hand, require actual conscious recall.
I know personally that kids can remember things. For me specifically, it was the trauma that I remember. Yes, most certainly kids can remember stuff at 2 and 3. For Beth, she was 1 to 1.5, and then she was going on to draw pictures about what happened to her. So this idea that, she was too young, she couldn't possibly remember that's false, isn't it?
Yeah. So firstly, I'm really sorry to hear what you've been through, Justin.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear what you went through too. And I want you guys to listen to this part, because there's people out there that will fight with you and tell you there's no way you remembered that, so on and so forth. I will tell you this, whether you remember it or not, your brain does. So even if you've been able to block it from your thought process, whatever the case may be, just remember that your brain doesn't forget it, and that your brain is growing so rapidly from birth to the end of your 5th birthday that it really does have an effect.
I had no idea. I'm really sorry. To answer your question, yes, absolutely. So I think what people sometimes mix up is that usually children can't form vivid memories, like vivid visual memories, until they're around, usually about 4, sometimes towards the end of 3. But that's what's typical. There is that, everything's on the spectrum. So there are definitely kids that can remember later, and there are kids that can't remember anything from when they're 3 or 4. They can't remember until they were 5 or 6. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say is that it doesn't have to be a vivid memory that you remember every single detail. You remember emotional. So your emotional memory develops earlier than your actual literal memory. So you can feel feelings. So if you had comforting, happy times when you were 2 or 3 years old, you can remember that, even if you don't remember the exact specific details, or vice versa. And in fact, studies have shown that traumatic memories are encoded deeper than neutral memories. So it absolutely makes sense to me that somebody who went through a traumatic experience could remember something. And it might not be very vivid, but they remember vaguely the feeling of being fearful, of not being loved, of not being supported.
Real quick, let me tell you why this is. So your amygdala is the part of the brain that houses emotion, and your hippocampus is the part of the brain that houses memory. The hippocampus and the amygdala are right next to each other. So when you have an emotional memory, you're more likely to remember it than if you have a non-emotional memory. For example, you probably remember your first kiss, but you probably don't remember what you ate for lunch last Tuesday night.
Of being distressed and not being comforted in that state. So absolutely, I think it's very feasible. And the very fact that you have children who go through, so not even Beth Thomas, but in general, we know that children who are put up for adoption, who are abused at a very young age, 6 months, a year and a half, have behavioral problems. That in itself, to me, proves that there must be some kind of emotional link to what they experience, because otherwise there's no logical reason why they would have behavioral problems compared to other kids who were put up for adoption at the same kind of age.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose there are two different avenues there. One is trauma affecting you young, which is one thing, but then actually remembering. For me, I do remember. Now I have gaps, but I do remember vividly quite a bit of it. Not the start, not the end, but kind of the events surrounding those 2 days when it happened. I remember, and it was only when I brought these occurrences up to my mom that she sort of went, "Holy shit! I know what day you're talking about." And she had went to work that day. She was a pizza girl. She'd went to work, and before she dropped me off at the babysitter's, I think it was the second night that I stayed there, the lady wanted to meet her on the road instead of at the house this time, and sort of exchanged me over between cars. And just as soon as she went to, give me or hand me over to the babysitter, I lost it. And I remember this vividly, reaching out, grabbing for my mother, begging for her not to make me go. And I'd never done that before. I was always very, very good with strangers, and it just didn't sit well with my mother. So she went to work. Couldn't shake the feeling. So she said to her boss, look, something's not right. I need to take off and go get my son. And the boss said, sure, no problem. And when she came to get me, the lady answered the door. Her name was Lynn. And she said, what are you doing here? My mom went, well, I'm off early. I came to get my son. And the lady said, well, you're not supposed to be here till, 2 a.m. or whatever. And my mom went, well, I'm here now. So, give me my fucking son. And the lady said, well, you can't have him until later, and tried to close the door. But my mom just went mama bear.
Oh my God. Could you guys imagine? What would you do if that happened? That lady was like, you can't have your son till 2 a.m. Why? So she can finish whatever she started? That's crazy to me. And the fact that he remembers it, I completely believe. Especially because his mom validates it for him. This is another thing. If you're a parent and something like this, become a criminal. Exactly, right? Me too. But if something like this ever happens to a child, sometimes parents will deny it or they'll want to deny it. They'll be like, oh, you were 2 years old. That didn't happen. Like, you must have been watching a movie. Or just so you know that validating your child's thought process is the best thing you could do for them. It not only lets them trust in you more, but they know that they could tell you anything and that you're going to believe them, as far as like if you've been through trauma and stuff like that. So as a parent, don't think that because your kid was 2 that you could just be like, no, me and dad never, smashed each other in the face. Like, you're actually doing them a disservice by doing that.
Mode and shoved past the woman, grabbed me. I'd been laying in a diaper or nappy, as you'd say in the UK, that hadn't been changed, and she just rushed out of the place. And it turned, and there were men in there partying and stuff. And 7 months later, the lady died of an OD, and we don't know who the men were. So I remember quite a bit of this. Some of it my mother told me, but a lot of it I remember quite vividly. So Rochelle Neve had talked about a specific instance where her mother had held Ricky over a bridge, threatening to drop him, and scared her, or had beaten her, or locked them in a room where there was piss and shit everywhere. Is it possible that we actually remember these things, or have we created some kind of memory based on our trauma?
Yeah, I think it's definitely possible. As I said before, different people have, you've got what's typical, then you've got people that are outliers. So I think it's definitely possible. I suppose it's hard to really know how real the details are, because our brain tends to confabulate, so it tends to fill in gaps which we're not sure about. So, I would say, especially for something that's traumatic or emotional, you're almost the person, the victim, almost certainly remembers the important bits of what actually physically happened with the abuse, and they may or may not remember the surrounding bits particularly well. So they might misremember, exactly what the layout of the house was, or exactly the words that were spoken, and they might fill in.
Okay, so just to add to this, you guys, what we tend to do is we use our senses, right? So when somebody retells a traumatic story, they'll often tell you things like, I'll never forget I felt da 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 da, or I'll never forget the smell of blah, 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 or what I saw. So they're the things that are being remembered are your sensory memories. We have motor memory, sensory memory, it's sensory memory. So the person is sensing the trauma and has partial memories. Just know that, let's say a kid is telling you a memory, and like this guy said, they have the house wrong type thing. It doesn't mean that their story is inaccurate. Our brain sees things as a whole instead of the sum of its parts. So if I drew a circle right now with a bunch of dots and I asked you to name what that was, you would all be able to say it's a circle, right? You wouldn't say that it's 16 dots. You would say, no, that's a circle. Why? Because our brain was able to fill in the dots and was able to see it as a circle for what it is. Our brain does the same thing with memory and with perception. So sensation, we all know what our senses are, right? Perception is how our brain interprets our senses. So right now, my occipital lobe is getting information, and it's telling me that what I'm seeing is a screen with a lady right now holding a picture. It says live 209 11 in the corner. I'm in the, on the left-hand side. I have my chat on the right-hand side, so on and so forth. So that's my perception. It's how my brain interprets my senses. We tend to do the same thing, whether we're children or adults. When we don't know the missing pieces, we tend to fill it in with what we do know. So for example, if let's say you see a picture on your social media of, let's say you're a group of 5 friends and 4 of them are at Wawa right now and they just took a picture and posted it. You might feel like, oh my gosh, like, did they make a plan and they left me out? And like, so your brain fills in all this stuff instead of talking to them to find out that 2 of them were, studying together at the one's house and the other one was picking the other one to go to dance class and they happen to see each other at Wawa and take a picture together. But to you, you might take it as, oh my God, they're hanging out and they didn't call me. Like, what's going on? And again, you might also perceive it as, my friends would never do that to me, so they must have just seen each other at Wawa. It all depends on your experience up until that point. Again, if anybody has any questions, please write it in the chat. I'd be happy to answer it.
Little gaps. The thing is, it's really hard to know what is true and what's not unless you have objective evidence. But the most important bit is remembered.
Yeah, and oddly enough, that's exactly how it is for me. I mean, I do remember the layout of the house, but I don't remember the color or where the couch was, or I couldn't walk through it now if I wanted to, and tell you where things were. But as you say, it's those traumatic events. I was made to go down on this babysitter, as a 2-year-old, and then another guy did stuff to me, and there was another guy. But it really is, as you say, it was those dramatic points that I remember. I don't remember much about the lead up. I remember a little about the lead up, but a lot of that is gone. So I suppose when Rochelle says that she remembers specifically her mother holding Ricky over the bridge, it's similar to what I experienced. So
and how old was Ricky at the time?
Ricky would have been 5, I think, 5 or 6. So it was just before he died, Rochelle would have been 3. So, and I was 2.5, I think. And I remember, there's no doubt about it. My mother didn't bring it up to me. I brought it up to her when I was 11 because I couldn't shake it. And I'd had these nightmares as well, too, that she told me about. I couldn't wake up for them when I was young. Things I didn't even know I experienced. But yeah, it was a crazy conversation that day. Let's say in that situation, I lived.
Real quick, you guys, why do I think that this is horrible right now? Because I could see why mom never brought it up to him. As a mom myself, I couldn't imagine just sitting down my 17-year-old and being like, let's talk about this. You know what I mean? However, this poor guy was holding on to this, and it was having an effect on his thought process, even though he wasn't speaking about it. It wasn't until he brought it up to his mom, and his mom did the right thing and told him the truth, that it even occurred to him that, that he felt vindicated or validated. And that's what we all want in life, right? We want to feel validated.
With this babysitter, and I was treated like this daily, to the point that I thought this was normal behavior. At what point would the effects become irreversible? At what point would what was happening to me become something sexually that would be encoded in me, like some kind of fetish? Because I've seen it a lot with abuse victims that have maybe not got the treatment and then maybe went on to harm people themselves. They repeat what happened to them often. Like Luis Garavito was a perfect example.
Yeah. So my answer to that, Justin, would be the same as my answer to a lot of psychiatric questions, I'm afraid, which is that it completely depends. It's so variable for different people.
The best available research suggests that 75% or more of those who commit acts of sexual or physical abuse against others were themselves abused as children. However, the research also indicates that the vast majority of children who are sexually abused do not go on to abuse others.
Let me just repeat that in case anybody was confused about that. If you take all of the perpetrators and you look at perpetrators, approximately 75% of perpetrators, so 3 out of 4 of them, were abused themselves. However, most victims, if you look at victim as a whole, most victims never turn out to be perpetrators. So what they're saying here is that they're looking at the perpetrators that become victims, not victims that become perpetrators. That's where that number comes in at.
So some people have gone through very horrific abuse and have ended up surprisingly being very sort of emotionally resilient and having quite minimal psychiatric damage, whereas some people have gone through, relatively speaking, low levels of trauma and can be quite damaged. So I'll give you some specific examples of the cases that I've seen. So as you know, I do criminal cases, but I'm doing somebody. And there was a man called Johnston of young schoolboys in the 1970s. And he got away with it, even though other teachers suspected what was going on. It's a whole different conversation. And he got moved between schools, basically got away with it for years. And then when the allegations surfaced, when the men were older, he committed suicide, so he never got justice. But I was instructed by the solicitor's firm to carry out an assessment on these men. So I assessed quite a few of them. It's probably about 8 or 9 altogether. This was all about maybe 3 years ago now. So I saw them all within the space of a few weeks. And the abuse was very, very similar, like the grooming, the telling them that they were special, and getting them to come to their offices for these special lessons where you actually abuse them. And even the type of the abuse was almost identical. I won't go through it all for your viewers. But what really surprised me, even doing all my training in psychiatry, was that the outcome was very different. So there was at least one person I could think of. And this was, just to be clear, this was prolonged abuse. This for each individual victim. It wasn't just a one-off incident. It was something that happened for about 2 or 3 years, maybe up to several times per month. So at least one of the victims was relatively unscathed. I would say that I diagnosed him with dysthymia, which is just an unstable low mood, but not quite bad enough to be depression. But he was successful. He had a family of his own. He had a couple of kids. He had quite a high-flying corporate job. Was on a very good salary. To all intents and purposes, if you looked at him from the outside, you didn't know what he'd been through. You wouldn't have suspected that anything went on. Having said that, he was the exception. Most of the other cases had some form of anxiety or depression, and some had post-traumatic stress disorder. So that is a key diagnosis related to trauma. In fact, I've seen more cases of post-traumatic stress disorder, far more than I have ever of reactive attachment disorder. I think for a couple of reasons, because reactive attachment disorder is usually diagnosed at a young age and people can grow out of it. So by the time that I see them as adults, it's often either not been caught in the diagnosis or kind of is lost in the medical notes. And also because post-traumatic stress disorder is usually when the event has happened later in life, so people are more likely to remember it clearly. So, adolescence, adulthood. So of the men that I assessed, a huge proportion had anxiety, depression. A smaller proportion, but significant, had post-traumatic stress disorder. So I suppose.
So a psych for sore minds, please everybody go give him some love too. That's the doctor we're talking about here. And I think it's important to point out what he's saying here. So what you guys watched earlier in that first video, they set you up for all the stuff with the reactive attachment disorder. But if you go on to watch the second video, which I think is important and I show in my abnormal psych classes, is that far more people wind up getting post-traumatic stress disorder than reactive attachment disorder. So this was one of the main reasons why I felt the need to pop one here and give you guys like the full story, because 12 gauge was not spreading misinformation. I just knew that there was another part of it that needed to be added to it. So I wanted to add on to 12 gauge. So 12 gauge, if you watch this, I was adding on to what you already did, not, going against you. But I think it's important to note that most people will wind up having post-traumatic stress disorder as opposed to a reactive attachment disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder occurs after 30 days after a trauma. For the first 30 days, we call it acute stress disorder. If you ever experience a trauma, I would encourage you to speak as much as you can about it and try to get as much help with it as you can in the first 30 days. It's not until after that first 30 days that it turns into post-traumatic stress disorder. So it's really important for people to know that within the first 30 days, talk, tell your story in a way that you feel safe.
This is a rambling question is that it's so varied. So there will be some people that went through exactly the circumstances you're talking about of Beth Thomas, who probably would be a little bit messed up in childhood, but would be able to, just because their emotional resilience, will probably be able to, I don't know what the term is, snap out of it, grow out of it, relearn their emotions out of it relatively easily, which I think happened to Beth eventually. And there'll be other people who are completely damaged, who will be, could have everything from post-traumatic stress disorder to complex PTSD to suicidality to self-harm to possibly being abusers themselves. There's just such a whole range of spectrum, and it's so unpredictable that you can't say there's no such thing as a typical case, I would say.
I recently interviewed a famous forensic biologist named Dr. Mark Benecke, German guy, very interesting character. We were talking about Luis Garavito, who had been abused badly as a child and went on to kill and torture and rape 300 to 400 boys, plus hundreds of others that he would have just, picked up in like an area where there would have been a lot of child prostitution, child trafficking, where he would have just, taken those kids as well. And one thing he mentioned was that once it appears via, current studies that once something becomes ingrained in someone as a fetish, as they move on into, I guess, maybe it's later teens or early adult, once it gets to that point, there hasn't really been any documented cases where people were able to change that. Now, whatever that is. Maybe you have a foot fetish. Maybe you're into little kids. But he was under the impression that the given evidence at the moment states that this isn't something that has not that it can't be changed, but that it's never really been seen to be changed.
So what he's talking about is paraphilic disorders, sexual disorders. And what he's asking the doctor here is that although somebody like Beth was able to get help at a young age during brain development, he's asking the doctor, at what point is it too late? At one point, does this turn into a fetish of some sort that the person can't go back from? And I'm curious to see what the doctor says, because I'm being honest, I don't remember what he says.
Yeah. So I'll tell you my thoughts about that. I suppose it's quite hard to measure, because especially if you're talking about, you say little kids, so, people that offend against children, you can never really know 100% if they're telling the truth, because it's quite easy for somebody to say, I don't have those thoughts anymore, if they're in prison and they've had this rehabilitation, or even in one of my psychiatric units. So I would broadly agree that the thought process itself is unlikely to change, but that's not the important bit. The important bit is their behavior and when they act on those impulses. So I remember being asked in an interview quite recently about paedophilia. So the question the interviewer asked was, is paedophilia a mental illness? And my answer was potentially controversial. It depends how you define mental illness, but it's not the fault of the person that has those thoughts, because that is ingrained, that is a fetish, that is something that's come from that's developed during their puberty and during their adolescence, possibly in relation to abuse they've suffered. But that's not the important bit. That's not actually what really matters. What matters is whether they act on those behaviors or not. And that absolutely can change. And that can change for a number of reasons. It could be that somebody themselves has an internal epiphany and feels a huge amount of guilt for what they've done before. It could just be the pressure of society, right? So they've already been caught 2 or 3 times. They've been in and out of the prison system, probably been victimized, probably rightly so, some would say, because of the types of nature of their offenses. So they want to turn their lives around, not because they've developed more empathy or because they've looked into the morality of their past behaviors, but because they don't want to keep living their life like that. So it's absolutely possible to change the behavior. And I think that's the important bit more than the fetish.
Possibly. I mean, I guess you have to look at it and you have to ask yourself, is it worth the risk to other people? I mean, this is always where you and I kind of go in separate ways, but it doesn't change the fact that how much I can learn from what you have to say, and it really helps me see things from another side. But yeah, still, I'm of the mindset, and I suppose it's not coming from a medical background. It's coming from someone who's been through it, abuse specifically. I have a mother who has been through it way more than I have, and her sisters. I think even my grandmother. I've seen it a lot. So I'm of the mindset that if you've reoffended twice, meaning you've offended 3 times when it comes to kids, you don't get out. You've proven that you cannot control those thoughts. Now it's different. Say someone who has these thoughts and they come forward and they go, I have these thoughts. I can't fucking stand it. I want to fix it. I haven't acted on them. I've never downloaded CP or anything like that, but I want to fucking stop this. I know. Okay. I've got a lot more sympathy for someone like that. That's clearly.
I actually think, you guys, that they're both saying the same thing, believe it or not. I think it's just, he's saying that this is where they differ, but I think both things could be true, right? So what the doctor is saying, and is very true, is the fact that something becomes criminal once it's acted upon. Just you can't get in trouble for a thought process. However, I think what the other guy is saying is that with pedophilia, that he doesn't see anybody that changes from that. And what I would tell you from my knowledge, my expertise, and experience and stuff, is that a pedophile's sexual orientation is children. Okay, so let me start with that. And there's a difference between a pedophile and somebody who SAs, right? So a pedophile is prepubescent, and then SA would be after somebody hits puberty. So you can SA a child, obviously, but I'm saying as far as how you would be defined in the system, let's say, okay? So when it comes to pedophilia, I do agree that you're not going to change a pedophile. If you think about it right now, whatever your sexual orientation is, if I told you tomorrow to change your sexual orientation, even if you could physically do so, mentally, it would never feel right? Because that wouldn't be where that wouldn't be your truth, okay? So in that sense, I think that he's right, that if a pedophile has now hurt 3 children, that the chances are, because we know that the best predictor of future behavior is past relevant behavior, is that the person will reoffend. So I do agree with that. So I think that both of these guys can be correct at the same time. And I think what the guy with the experience, so not the doctor, and I feel so bad. I apologize to you if you ever see this and I didn't say your name. I just know it as disturbing truth. So in this case, I'm going to play more, but I think he's going off of his experience and the fact that what he's saying is that he can have more empathy for somebody who goes to therapy and says, I'm having these thoughts and I don't want to act on them. What do I do? And I do agree with that. I think that is the best route. Unfortunately, most people will feel shame and guilt, so they won't go to therapy and say that. And a lot of times it's not until it's court ordered, till you find somebody in this situation.
Some kind of sickness or disorder that is beyond their control, but they can control whether or not they go and get help. And
I would agree with pretty much everything you said there. There's one thing that I would add to that. If somebody, and I have met people like this, not very often, but I'd say probably once or twice a year, somebody like this comes across my radar. If somebody offends only during a mental illness, so say if they've got severe bipolar affective disorder and they go into a manic phase, so you might know this, but when you suffer from mania, then you're disinhibited, you're very speeded up, you make very impulsive actions, you can be quite aggressive at times, or your thoughts can be racing, you can come up with lots of ideas and never finish them. So in that context, if they sexually offend, then I would want to treat that. Obviously, it's not just a case of giving them some tablets and saying goodbye to them. It's far too risky. I would want to follow them up in the community. I'd want to see them on a regular basis. But I suppose what I'm saying is that's another situation for me. I don't know how you feel about this, Justin, where I think that somebody can be given another chance if they've got a mental illness which we can treat.
I suppose the risk that we run there is tarring people with bipolar disorder as potentially having a hood pass to pedophilia if they're in a manic state, and I can't agree with that. But I understand where you're coming from.
I don't agree with that either.
I definitely understand where you're coming from, and I'm all for them being treated, just not released, hung up by their necks. No.
And just to throw a spanner in the works, I just wanted to see what you think about this. So, again, if we're talking about people who are intentionally evil, people who have no remorse or don't care about offending against children, then you and I are on the same wavelength. I don't think they should be given second or third chances. What about somebody that's got like a learning disability? So somebody with, say, severe autism who has these sexual urges, who doesn't really understand the impact of their actions. Would you prefer for them to have a comfortable life but always in detention, or do you think somebody like that should be given a chance at living not completely independently but staying supported accommodation, but there's a risk that they could leave their accommodation and do something sexual?
That's a really good question, you guys. I would be interested to see what you think in the chat.
Again, I think we run the risk of tarring people with autism as potential
I agree with
having
that.
potential hood passes to pedophilia. I understand a learning difficulty. I think in that situation, I would agree with your first statement that they need to be in a medical institution and comfortable. I mean, this when you go that deep into it, that it's But the question really is does that person understand? Did they know what they were doing was wrong when they did it? And if they didn't, why didn't they? I mean, these are questions that I would have to answer. I personally just can't advocate for letting a offending pedophile back out ever. I just can't. I can't do it no matter what. Even if myself, maybe I got possessed by a demon for real, like honestly got possessed by a demon and went out and did something like that. And they exorcised me and the demon was gone. Lock me up.
I think that pretty much along the lines of what we're saying. I think if somebody's repeat offender shows no kind of remorse, shows no willing to change, then I think they're unsafe and they should be locked up. I think most people would agree with that. I think there is a grey area in people who are less responsible for their actions. So people with mental illnesses, learning disabilities. I just want to make the point that I mentioned people with bipolar and people with autism who've committed these kind of offences. It is extremely rare. It just happens to be that as a forensic psychiatrist, that's exactly the kind of thing that I see, because those are the cases that are referred to me. So I don't want to sort of add to the stigma of mental illness and say that most people, or even a significant proportion of people with those illnesses, would go on to do that kind of offence.
And that's what I agree. That's what I agree with mostly.
Yeah. But oh my God, I have literally seen people who have offended with a learning disability because they don't understand what sexuality is, what consent is. They still have these urges. People around them have boyfriends and girlfriends and partners. They want one and they don't know how to do it. So, one man that I wrote about in my book went and sort of groped some random women, but when you spoke to him about it, he didn't understand the impact of his actions. So that's the grey area that's harder to deal with, because, there's a moral issue of locking somebody up for the rest of their lives, but also there's a resource issue as well. There's only a limited number of hospital places, and if somebody has committed behaviour like that and then has been absolutely fine on the ward or in the care home for, say, 5, 10, 15 years, then will it come to a point where you can say they're safe? And when is that point? It's a very murky kind of grey area.
It really is, and I think you even run a even bigger risk of creating more people who could potentially abuse by letting someone out that shouldn't be, which eats into those resources even more so. I think where we probably could agree is that someone like you've just discussed, or like you've just described, I wouldn't put them in prison. I wouldn't put, because it's not punishment that they need. It's it is help. It is. I mean, if you're talking about someone who's got the mentality of a child Beth Thomas's age, and really doesn't understand it, and maybe were abused as well. I mean, you're right. There is a gray area there, and they should be treated. But I, under no circumstance, would ever let them out. But that's just me.
Okay, so
So I guess the only thing I would say here is that I think he's been a really good activist for Beth Thomas and her situation. My question would be, because Beth is, unfortunately, she goes on and abused her brother, and she was very young. So in that situation, she would be considered an offender, but she does get the help that she needs, and she doesn't go on to offend with anybody else. But under his definition there, he would have said that Beth should have gotten help, but that she should have stayed locked up. So almost as if, I don't know what happened. I don't know. Let me read what this says. So I heard that in jails in other countries aren't so punishment based and more treatment based. For those who don't understand their doings, that they're doing, feel they should be in an institution based on helping them. Isn't that the truth, right? Love and Passion. I think that is so important, and everybody please go over to that channel as well and subscribe. But I agree with you there. So in other countries, I think that's important, because not everybody watching this is in the United States. In the United States, our jails, our penitentiaries are meant to rehabilitate, but do they, right? Could people become, even more of a criminal or meet other criminals and further go, so there's so many different things. So I do think that you have a point there that we have to focus on where the person is located in the world. But I do think when it comes to pedophilia, that's like a whole different thing altogether, and needs to really be watched.
We're like the Charles Xavier of the debates, aren't we? Charles Xavier and Magneto, we'll politely agree to disagree.
Yeah, totally, yeah. And that's the thing about conversations with you that I really enjoy, is that we can have a conversation, and we can go different ways and different points. But I don't know about you, but I always learn something. It's a pleasure to have you on The Disturbing Truth again. If you don't know, Psych for Sore Eyes, Dr. Das, he's my doctor. I have him on my phone. I text him whenever I can't sleep and I need, verbal cuddles. He's my guy.
Just want to say thank you for having me on. I like talking with you, because you ask interesting questions, and you're not, we agree on a lot of things, but not on everything. And I'm always open to hearing other people's points of view, because sometimes.
So one of the things that I get out of this, you guys, I'll stop sharing that real quick, is that I would love to do that same thing. So if anybody ever wants to ask me questions or something like that, like, please feel free to reach out and, contact me, because I think that the best fight against anything, whether it be mental illness, crime, whatever it is education. So educating people, whether it be on how to up your chances of not being victimized is one thing, but then also helping people let go of things like shame and guilt and remorse, so that they can live a healthy, normal life. I do want to say that, what's the word I'm looking for? When you give your truth or whatever. So I just want to put it out there that I do have ADHD, and that I am on the spectrum, very high functioning, but I do think that it was important what he said, the one guy, when he said that, not to paint people with mental illness as somebody that could hurt others. So I think that that's important, and that's how I'll wrap up this live even, is to remind people that when we talk about true crime, that most people that suffer with a mental illness, and just so you know, the statistics show that approximately half of the adult population in the world will at some point be diagnosed with a disorder. And again, I always tell my students, whenever we get statistics in psychology, keep in mind that these are the statistics that are being reported. So how many people do you know might have a diagnosable disorder that's just never gone to seek therapy? So I think that's important. So I do want to make sure that everybody knows that most people with mental illness will never go on to harm anybody else. If anything, I would argue that if anybody was going to get hurt in the situation, it would be self-harm more than anything else, which we could have a discussion on. That's a totally different topic for another day. The last thing I just wanted to talk about, the doctor mentions the word dysthymia. So just in case anybody was like, huh? Dysthymia is a milder form of depression. So you experience a lot of the same symptoms, but the symptoms are a lot more mild and it lasts over a longer period of time. So, and this person doesn't always get diagnosed because they don't feel like they meet the criteria, let's say, for major depression. Like maybe they know somebody that had major depression and they're like, well, I'm not feeling like that. So maybe it's just something I'm going through in life. But know that dysthymia is a real thing and that there's a lot of people out there that aren't diagnosed with dysthymia that might have dysthymia. So again, you're feeling a lot of the same symptoms as depression, only they're a lot more mild and it lasts for a longer period of time. So the person might not put their finger on it that it's disordered or that it's interfering with daily functioning. But it very much does if it becomes disordered. So in order for something to be a disorder, it has to interfere with at least 2 areas of daily functioning. If it was just one area of daily functioning, we would change that area and the symptoms would go away. If it interferes with at least 2 areas of daily functioning, that's a different story. But I am going to close this up because I have been on for 2 hours and 35 minutes. And I know that now I feel like I'm in class. I feel like I'm teaching class and it's like coming to the end of the session. So I will say this. If anybody has any questions, you could always reach out to me. I did put my email in the chat, but you could also find it on my page. It's just my name, JaimeVona@gmail, JAIMEVONA@gmail. If anybody has any questions that maybe you wanted to ask me that you didn't want to ask on the live stream, I'd be happy to help you find a resource. Know that I never want to play a role of a therapist for anybody on here because, well, one, I can't legally because if we live in a different state, there's like state laws and stuff. But two, I want to make sure that I stay focused on being able to educate the broader masses more so than focus in on one particular person. However, if we're talking about a topic and somebody has experience, I absolutely want to hear about it. And I might even, help you make certain connections, but I don't ever want anybody to use the channel as like therapy, because if you are doing so, chances are you need to be seeing a therapist, and there's no shame in therapy. So everybody should go to therapy. I'm a true believer of it. And if anybody ever needs resources to find a therapist in your state, just reach out to me. I'll try to help you the best that I can. I can't promise that I'll be successful every time, but I'll try. And if I don't know the answer, I'll find somebody who does. But if there's any questions, just put it in the comment. It was a pleasure to be with all of you today. 12 Gauge, I hope that everybody goes and watches 12 Gauges live from earlier. That would be like a part 1 to this. I just felt the need because I teach this, and 12 Gauge was posing a lot of questions. I was about to go on and just start typing, and then I was like, I'll be typing for the next 3 hours because I had so many questions. You're welcome, Aquarius. Thank you so much for being here. But everybody go watch 12 Gauges. And then if you watch this afterwards, this was like the follow-up. I also want to keep my promise. And when we hang up, I'll go to YouTube to the editing thing, the studio, and I will put the links to both of the men that we just watched. And I will also put a link to the adult attachment quiz that's done by Harvard University. I really would like to see, if people do it, and then if we do a follow-up on attachment styles, that way you know what your attachment style is, and I can answer specific questions about your attachment style. Or if you have a question like, did this happen because of that? Obviously, if I don't know the whole story, I can't say for sure, but I can give you my educated guess. So that's my legal way of saying I can't do therapy because want to continue to do psychology. So, but I hope everybody has a beautiful Sunday. I'll probably see you guys in someone else's chat later on. So God bless all of you and have a beautiful day. Thank you so much for coming by. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe to the channel and maybe hit like so that I can eventually get into the algorithm. We'll see what happens. If it's meant to be, it'll be. Happy Sunday, all. Happy Sunday, Aquarius. Thank you all for stopping by. And I appreciate all of you more than I can verbalize. Thank you. Please email me and have a wonderful evening too. I'm going to go check your channel out right now. All right. Bye-bye.